make some mistakes along the way, but that's where we're going. We can walk fast.
We're live from Georgia, the key battleground state in the race for the White House. In just moments, the current U.S. president will debate the former U.S. president as their party's presumptive nominees of the first in American history. We want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world to our studios in Atlanta. This is the CNN presidential debate.
This debate is being produced by CNN and is coming to you live on CNN, CNN International, CNN.com, CNN Max, CNN Espanol. This is a pivotal moment between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump and their rematch for the nation's highest office. Each will make his case to the American people with just over 4 months until election day. Good evening, I'm Dana Bash, anchor of CNN's Inside Politics and co-anchor of State of the Union.
I'm Jake Tapper, anchor of CNN's The Lead and co-anchor of State of the Union. Dana and I will co-moderate this evening. Our job is to facilitate a debate between the two candidates tonight. Before we introduce them, we want to share the rules of the debate with the audience at home. Former President Trump will be on the left side of the screen. President Biden will be appearing on the right. A coin toss determines their position. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer a question and 1 minute each for responses and rebuttals. An additional minute for follow-up, clarification, or response is at the moderator's discretion.
When it's time for a candidate to speak, his microphone will be turned on and his opponent's microphone will be turned off. Should a candidate interrupt when his microphone is muted, it will be difficult to understand for viewers at home. At the end of the debate, each candidate will get 2 minutes for closing statements. There is no studio audience tonight. Pre-written notes, props, or contact with campaign staff are not permitted during the debate. By accepting our invitation to debate, both candidates and their campaigns agreed to accept these rules.
Now, please welcome the 46th President of the United States, Joe Biden. And please welcome the 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being here. Let's begin the debate, and let's start with the issue that voters consistently say is their top concern, the economy. President Biden, inflation has slowed, but prices remain high. Since he took office, the price of essentials has increased. For example, a basket of groceries that cost $100 then now costs more than $120. And typical home prices have jumped more than 30%. What do you say to voters who feel they are worse off under your presidency than they were under President Trump?
We got to take a look at what I was left when I became president. Mr. Trump up. We had an economy that was in free fall. Pandemic was so badly handled. Many people were dying. All he said was, it's not that serious. Just inject a little bleach in your arm. It'll be all right. The economy collapsed. There were no jobs. Unemployment rate rose to 15%. It was terrible. And so what we had to do is try to put things back together again. And that's exactly what we began to do. We created 50,000 new jobs. We brought out a position where we have 800,000 manufacturing jobs. But there's more to be done. There's more to be done. Working class people are still in trouble. I come from Scranton, Pennsylvania. I'm from a household where the kitchen table, things weren't even. To $15 for a insulin shot as opposed to $400. No senior has to pay more than $200 for any drug, all the drugs they can include beginning next year. And the situation is we're going to make that available to everybody, to all Americans. So we're working to bring down the price of around the kitchen table, and that's what we're going to get done.
Thank you. President Trump?
We have the greatest economy in the history of our country. We have never done so well. Everybody was amazed by it. Other countries were copying us. We got hit with COVID, and when we did, we spent the money necessary so we wouldn't end up in a Great Depression, the likes of which we had in 1929. By the time we finished, so we did a great job. We got a lot of credit for the economy, a lot of credit for the military, and no wars, and so many other things. Everything was rocking good. But the thing we never got the credit for, and we should have, is getting us out of that COVID mess. He created mandates that was a disaster for our country. But other than that, we had given them back a country where the stock market actually was higher than pre-COVID, and nobody thought that was even possible. The only jobs he created are for illegal immigrants and bounce-back jobs, a bounce back from the COVID. He has not done a good job. He's done a poor job, and inflation's killing our country. It is absolutely killing us.
Thank you. President Biden?
Well, look, the greatest economy in the world, he's the only one who thinks that, I think. I don't know anybody else who thinks he had the greatest economy in the world. And, you know, the fact of the matter is that we find ourselves in a situation where his economy, he rewarded the wealthy. He had the largest tax cut in American history, $2 trillion. He raised a deficit larger than any president has in any one term. He's the only president other than Herbert Hoover who's lost more jobs than he had when he began, since Herbert Hoover. The idea that he did something that was significant. And the military, you know, when he was president, they were still killing people in Afghanistan. He didn't do anything about that. When he was president, we were still finding ourselves in a position where you had a notion that we were this safe country. The truth is, I'm the only president this century that doesn't have this decade, that doesn't have any troops dying anywhere in the world like he did.
President Trump, I want to follow up if I can.
Am I allowed to respond to him?
Well, I'm going to ask you a follow-up. You can do whatever you want with the minute that we give you. I want to follow up. You want to impose a 10% tariff on all goods coming into the U.S. How will you ensure that that doesn't drive prices even higher?
It's not going to drive them higher. It's just going to cause countries that have been ripping us off for years, like China and many others, in all fairness to China. It's going to just force them to pay us a lot of money, reduce our deficit tremendously, and give us a lot of power for other things. But he made a statement. The only thing he was right about is I gave you the largest tax cut in history. I also gave you the largest regulation cut in history. That's why we had all the jobs. And the jobs went down, and then they bounced back, and he's taking credit for bounce-back jobs. You can't do that. He also said he inherited 9% inflation. No. He inherited almost no inflation, and it stayed that way for 14 months, and then it blew up under his leadership because they spent money like a bunch of people that didn't know what they were doing, and they don't know what they were doing. It was the worst, probably the worst administration in history. There's never been. And as far as Afghanistan is concerned, I was getting out of Afghanistan, but we were getting out with dignity, with strength, with power. He got out. It was the most embarrassing day in the history of our country's life.
President Trump, over the last 8 years, under both of your administrations, the national debt soared to record highs. And according to a new nonpartisan analysis, President Trump, your administration approved $8.4 trillion in new debt, while so far, President Biden, you've approved $4.3 trillion in new debt. So, former President Trump, many of the tax cuts that you signed into law are set to expire next year. You want to extend them and go even further, you say. With the U.S. facing trillion-dollar deficits and record debt, why should top earners and corporations pay even less in taxes than they do now?
Because the tax cuts spurred the greatest economy that we've ever seen just prior to COVID. And even after COVID, it was so strong that we were able to get through COVID much better than just about any other country. But we spurred, that tax spurred. Now, when we cut the taxes, as an example, the corporate tax was cut down to 21% from 39%, plus beyond that. We took in more revenue with much less tax, and companies were bringing back trillions of dollars back into our country. The country was going like never before, and we were ready to start paying down debt. We were ready to start using the liquid gold right under our feet, the oil and gas right under our feet. We were going to have something that nobody else has had. We got hit with COVID. We did a lot to fix it. I gave him an unbelievable situation with all of the therapeutics and all of the things that we came up with. We gave him something great. Remember, more people died under his administration, even though we had largely fixed it. More people died under his administration than our administration, and we were right in the middle of it, something which a lot of people don't like to talk about. But he had far more people dying in his administration. He did the mandate, which is a disaster, mandating it. The vaccine went out. He did a mandate on the vaccine, which is the thing that people most objected to about the vaccine. And he did a very poor job, just a very poor job. And I will tell you, not only poor there, but throughout the entire world, we're no longer respected as a country. They don't respect our leadership. They don't respect the United States anymore. We're like a third world nation between weaponization of his election, trying to go after his political opponent, all of the things he's done. We've become like a third world nation, and it's a shame. The damage he's done to our country. And I'd love to ask him, and will, why he allowed millions of people to come in here from prisons, jails, and mental institutions to come into our country and destroy our country.
President Trump, we will get to immigration later in this block. President Biden, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to this question about the national debt.
He had the largest national debt of any president in a 4-year period, number one. Number two, that $2 trillion tax cut benefited the very wealthy. What I'm going to do is fix the tax system. For example, we have 1,000 trillionaires in America. Billionaires in America. And what's happening? They're in a situation where they, in fact, pay 8.2% in taxes. If they just paid 24%, 25%, either one of those numbers, they'd raise $500 million, billion dollars, I should say, in a 10-year period. We'd be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our health care system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare because all of these people are coming in. They're putting them on Medicare. They're putting them on Social Security. They're going to destroy Social Security. This man is going to single-handedly destroy Social Security. These millions and millions of people coming in, they're trying to put them on Social Security. He will wipe out Social Security. He will wipe out Medicare. So he was right in the way he finished that sentence. And it's a shame. What's happened to our country in the last 4 years is not to be believed. Foreign countries, I'm friends with a lot of people, they cannot believe what happened to the United States of America. We're no longer respected. They don't like us. We give them everything they want, and they think we're stupid. They think we're very stupid people. What we're doing for other countries, and they do nothing for us. What this man has done is absolutely criminal.
Thank you, President Trump. Dana?
This is the first presidential election since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. This morning, the court ruled on yet another abortion case, temporarily allowing emergency abortions to continue in Idaho, despite that state's restrictive ban. Former President Trump, you take credit for the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, which returned the issue of abortion to the states.
Correct.
However, the federal government still plays a role in whether or not women have access to abortion pills. They're used in about 2/3 of all abortions. As president, would you block abortion medication?
First of all, the Supreme Court just approved the abortion pill, and I agree with their decision to have done that, and I will not block it. And if you look at this whole question that you're asking, complex but not really complex. 51 years ago, you had Roe v. Wade, and everybody wanted to get it back to the states. Everybody, without exception. Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives. Everybody wanted it back. Religious leaders. And what I did is I put 3 great Supreme Court justices on the court, and they happened to vote in favor of killing Roe v. Wade and moving it back to the states. This is something that everybody wanted. Now, 10 years ago or so, they started talking about how many weeks and how many this, getting into other things. But every legal scholar throughout the world, the most respected, wanted it brought back to the states. I did that. Now the states are working it out. If you look at Ohio, it was a decision that was an end result that was a little bit more liberal than you would have thought. Kansas, I would say the same thing. Texas is different. Florida is different. But they're all making their own decisions right now. And right now, the states control it. That's the vote of the people. Like Ronald Reagan, I believe in the exceptions. I am a person that believes. And frankly, I think it's important to believe in the exceptions. Some people, you have to follow your heart. Some people don't believe in that. But I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. I think it's very important. Some people don't. Follow your heart. But you have to get elected also. And because that has to do with other things. You got to get elected. The problem they have is they're radical because they will take the life of a child in the 8th month, the 9th month, and even after birth. After birth, if you look at the former governor of Virginia, he was willing to do this. He said, we'll put the baby aside and we'll determine what we do with the baby, meaning we'll kill the baby. What happened is we brought it back to the states, and the country is now coming together on this issue. It's been a great thing.
Thank you. President Biden?
It's been a terrible thing, what you've done. The fact is that the vast majority of constitutional scholars supported Roe when it was decided, supported Roe. And that's this idea that they were all against it is just ridiculous. And this is the guy who says the state should be able to have it. We're in a state where in 6 weeks, you don't even know whether you're pregnant or not, but you cannot see a doctor, and have him decide on what your circumstances are, whether you need help. The idea that states are able to do this is a little like saying we're going to turn civil rights back to the states, let each state have a different rule. Look, there's so many young women who have been, including a young woman who just was murdered, and he went to the funeral. The idea that she was murdered by an immigrant coming in, they talk about that. But here's the deal. There's a lot of young women who are being raped by their in-laws, by their spouses, brothers and sisters, it's just ridiculous, and they can do nothing about it. And they try to arrest them when they cross state lines.
Thank you.
There have been many young women murdered by the same people he allows to come across our border. We have a border that's the most dangerous place anywhere in the world, considered the most dangerous place anywhere in the world. And he opened it up, and these killers are coming into our country, and they are raping and killing women. And it's a terrible thing. As far as the abortion is concerned, it is now back with the states. The states are voting. In many cases, it's frankly a very liberal decision. In many cases, it's the opposite. But they're voting, and it's bringing it back to the vote of the people, which is what everybody wanted, including the founders, if they knew about this issue, which, frankly, they didn't. But they would have, everybody wanted brought back. Ronald Reagan wanted it brought back. He wasn't able to get it. Everybody wanted it brought back, and many presidents had tried to get it back. I was the one to do it. And again, this gives it the vote of the people, and that's where they wanted it. Every legal scholar wanted it that way.
Staying on the topic of abortion, President Biden, 7 states, I'll let you do that. This is the same topic. 7 states have no legal restrictions on how far into a pregnancy a woman can obtain an abortion. Do you support any legal limits on how late a woman should be able to terminate a pregnancy?
I supported Roe v. Wade, which had 3 trimesters. The first time is between the woman and the doctor. Second time is between the doctor and an extreme situation. The third time is between the doctor, between the woman and the state. The idea that the politicians, that the founders wanted the politicians to be the ones making decisions about women's health is ridiculous. That's the last. No politician should be making that decision. A doctor should be making those decisions. That's how it should be run. That's what you're going to do. And if I'm elected, I'm going to restore Roe v. Wade.
So that means he can take the life of the baby in the 9th month and even after birth, because some states, Democrat run, take it after birth. Again, the former governor of Virginia, put the baby down, then we decide what to do with it. So he's willing to, as we say, rip the baby out of the womb in the 9th month and kill the baby. Nobody wants that to happen, Democrat or Republican. Nobody wants it to happen.
That is simply not true. The Roe v. Wade does not provide for that. That's not the circumstance. Only if a woman's life is in danger, she's going to die. That's the only circumstance in which that can happen. But we are not for late-term abortion, period. Period, period.
Under Roe v. Wade, you have late-term abortion. You can do whatever you want, depending on the state. You can do whatever you want. We don't think that's a good thing. We think it's a radical thing. We think the Democrats are the radicals, not the Republicans.
For 51 years, that was the law. 51 years, constitutional scholarship said it was the right way to go. 51 years, and it was taken away because this guy put very conservative members on the Supreme Court. He takes credit for taking it away. What's he going to do? What's he going to do, in fact, if the MAGA Republicans, he gets elected, and the MAGA Republicans control the Congress, and they pass a universal ban on abortion, period, across the board at 6 weeks or 7 or 8 or 10 weeks, something very, very conservative. Is he going to sign that bill? I'll veto it. He'll sign it.
Thank you.
Let's turn now to the issue of immigration and border security. President Biden, a record number of migrants have illegally crossed the southern border on your watch. Overwhelming border states and
the families were separated. That's not the right way to go. What I've done since I've changed the law, what's happened? I've changed it in a way that now you're in a situation where there are 40% fewer people coming across the border illegally. That's better than when he left office. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look, we had the safest border in the history of our country. The border, all he had to do was leave it. All he had to do was leave it. He decided to open up our border, open up our country to people that are from prisons, people that are from mental institutions, insane asylum, terrorists. We have the largest number of terrorists coming into our country right now, all terrorists, all over the world, not just in South America, all over the world. They come from the Middle East, everywhere. All over the world, they're pouring in. And this guy just left it open. And he didn't need legislation because I didn't have legislation. I said, close the border. We had the safest border in history. In that final couple of months of my presidency, we had, according to Border Patrol, who is great, and by the way, who endorsed me for president, but I won't say that, but they endorsed me for president. Brandon, just speak to him. But look, we had the safest border in history. Now we have the worst border in history. There's never been anything like it. And people are dying all over the place, including the people that are coming up in caravans.
Thank you, President Trump. President Biden?
The only terrorist who's done anything crossing the border is one who came along and killed 3, under his administration, killed an al-Qaeda person come in his administration, killed 3 American soldiers, killed 3 American soldiers. That's the only terrorist that's there. I'm not saying that no terrorist ever got through, but the idea they're emptying their prisons, we're welcoming these people, that's simply not true. There's no data to support what he says. Once again, he's exaggerating, he's lying.
President Trump, staying on the topic of immigration, you've said that you're going to carry out, quote, the largest domestic deportation operation in American history, unquote. Does that mean that you will deport every undocumented immigrant in America, including those who have jobs, including those whose spouses are citizens, and including those who have lived here for decades? And if so, how will you do it?
Just 1 second. He said we killed 3 people. The people we killed are al-Baghdadi and Soleimani, the 2 greatest terrorists, biggest terrorists anywhere in the world, and it had a huge impact on everything, not just border, on everything. He's the one that killed people with the bad water, including hundreds of thousands of people dying, and also killing our citizens when they come in. We are living right now in a rat's nest. They're killing our people in New York, in California, in every state in the union, because we don't have borders anymore. Every state is now a border. And because of his ridiculous, insane, and very stupid policies, people are coming in and they're killing our citizens at a level that we've never seen. We call it migrant crime. I call it Biden migrant crime. They're killing our citizens at a level that we've never seen before. And you're reading it like these three incredible young girls over the last few days. One of them, I just spoke to the mother, and they just had the funeral for this girl, 12 years old. This is horrible what's taken place. What's taken place in our country, we're literally an uncivilized country now. He doesn't want it to be. He just doesn't know. He opened the borders. Nobody's ever seen anything like. And we have to get a lot of these people out, and we have to get them out fast because they're going to destroy our country. Just take a look at where they're living. They're living in luxury hotels in New York City and other places. Our veterans are on the street. They're dying because he doesn't care about our veterans. He doesn't care. He doesn't like the military at all. And he doesn't care about our veterans. Nobody been worse. I had the highest approval rating for veterans taking care of the VA. He has the worst. He's gotten rid of all the things that I approved. Choice, that I got through Congress, all of the different things I approved, they abandoned. We had by far the highest, and now it's down in less than half because he's done all these great things that we did. And I think he did it just because I approved it, which is crazy. But he has killed so many people at our border by allowing all of these people to come in. And it's a very sad day in America.
President Biden, you have the mic.
Every single thing he said is a lie. Every single one. For example, veterans are a hell of a lot better off since I passed the PACT Act. 1 million of them now have insurance, and their families have it. Their families have it because what happened, whether it was Agent Orange or burn pits, they're all being covered now. And his group opposed that. We're also in a situation where we have great respect for veterans. My son spent a year in Iraq, living next to one of those burn pits, came back with stage 4 glioblastoma. I was recently in France for D-Day, and I spoke all about those heroes that died. I went to the World War I cemetery he refused to go to. He was standing with his 4-star general, and he told me, he said, I don't want to go in there because they're a bunch of losers and suckers. My son was not a loser, was not a sucker. You're the sucker. You're the loser.
President Trump?
First of all, that was a made-up quote, suckers and losers. They made it up. It was in a third-rate magazine that's failing, like many of these magazines. He made that up. He put it in commercials. We've notified him. We had 19 people that said I didn't say it. And think of this. Who would say I'm at a cemetery or I'm talking about our veterans? Because nobody's taken better care. I'm so glad this came up, and he brought it up. There's nobody that's taken better care of our soldiers than I have. To think that I would, in front of generals and others, say suckers and losers. We have 19 people that said it was never said by me. It was made up by him, just like Russia was made up, just like the 51 intelligence agents are made up, just like the new thing with the 16 economists are talking. It's the same thing. 51 intelligence agents said that the laptop was Russia disinformation. It wasn't. That came from his son, Hunter. It wasn't Russia disinformation. He made up the suckers and losers, so he should apologize to me right now.
4-star general standing to your side who was on your staff who said you said it, period. That's number one. And number two, the idea that I have to apologize to you for anything along the line. We've done more for veterans than any president has in American history. And they now are in their family. The only sacred obligation we have as a country is to care for our veterans when they come home and their families and equip them when they go to war. That's what we're doing. That's what the VA is doing now. They're doing more for veterans than ever before in our history.
All right, thank you so much.
Let's move to the topic of foreign policy. I want to begin with Russia's war against Ukraine, which is now in its third year. Former President Trump, Russian President Vladimir Putin says he'll only end this war if Russia keeps the Ukrainian territory it has already claimed and Ukraine abandons its bid to join NATO. Are Putin's terms acceptable to you?
First of all, our veterans and our soldiers can't stand this guy. They can't stand him. They think he's the worst commander-in-chief, if that's what you call him, that we've ever had. They can't stand him. So let's get that straight. And they like me more than just about any of them. And that's based on every single bit of information. As far as Russia and Ukraine, if we had a real president, a president that knew, that was respected by Putin, he would have never invaded Ukraine. A lot of people are dead right now, much more than people know. You know, they talk about numbers. You can double those numbers, maybe triple those numbers. He did nothing to stop it. In fact, I think he encouraged Russia from going in. I'll tell you what happened. He was so bad with Afghanistan. It was such a horrible embarrassment, most embarrassing moment in the history of our country, that when Putin watched that and he saw the incompetence, that he should have fired those generals, like I fired the one that you mentioned, and so he's got no love lost, but he should have fired those generals. No general got fired for the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country, Afghanistan, where we left billions of dollars of equipment behind. We lost 13 beautiful soldiers, and 38 soldiers were obliterated. And by the way, we left people behind, too. We left American citizens behind. When Putin saw that, he said, you know what? I think we're going to go in and maybe take this was his dream. I talked to him about it, his dream. The difference is he never would have invaded Ukraine. Never. Just like Israel would have never been invaded in a million years by Hamas. You know why? Because Iran was broke with me. I wouldn't let anybody do business with them. They ran out of money. They were broke. They had no money for Hamas. They had no money for anything. No money for terror. That's why you had no terror at all during my administration. This place, the whole world is blowing up under him.
President Biden?
I've never heard so much malarkey in my whole life. Look, the fact of the matter is that we're in a situation where, let's take the last point first. Iran attacked American troops, caused brain damage for a number of these troops, and he did nothing about it. Recently, not when he was president. They attacked. He said they're just having headaches. That's all it is. He didn't do a thing when the attack took place, number one. Number two, we got over 100,000 Americans and others out of Afghanistan during that airlift. Number three, we found ourselves in a situation where, if you take a look at what Trump did in Ukraine, this guy told Trump, do whatever you want, and do whatever you want. And that's exactly what Trump did to Putin, encourage him, do whatever you want. And he went in. And listen to what he said when he went in. He was going to take Kyiv in 5 days, remember? Because it's part of the old Soviet Union. That's what he wanted to reestablish. Kyiv, and he in fact didn't do it at all. He wasn't able to get it done, and they've lost thousands and thousands of troops, 500,000 troops.
President Trump,
I never said that.
For 1 minute, I just want to go back to my original question, which is, are Putin's terms acceptable to you? Keeping the territory in Ukraine?
Acceptable. No, they're not acceptable. But look, this is a war that never should have started. If we had a leader in this war, he led everybody along. He's given $200 billion now or more to Ukraine. He's given $200 billion. That's a lot of money. I don't think there's ever been anything like it. Every time that Zelensky comes to this country, he walks away with $60 billion. He's the greatest salesman ever. And I'm not knocking him. I'm not knocking anything. I'm only saying the money that we're spending on this war, and we shouldn't be spending, it should have never happened. I will have that war settled between Putin and Zelensky as president-elect before I take office on January 20th. I'll have that war settled. People being killed so needlessly, so stupidly, and I will get it settled, and I'll get it settled fast before I take office.
President Biden, you have a minute.
The fact is that Putin is a war criminal. He's killed thousands and thousands of people, and he has made one thing clear. He wants to reestablish what was part of the Soviet Empire, not just a piece. He wants all of Ukraine. That's what he wants. And then you think he'll stop there? Do you think he'll stop when if he takes Ukraine? What do you think happens to Poland? What do you think of Belarus? What do you think happens to those NATO countries? And so if you want a war, you ought to find out what he's going to do, because if in fact he does what he says and walks away, and by the way, all that money we give Ukraine are from weapons we make here in the United States. We give them the weapons, not the money at this point. And our NATO allies have produced as much funding for Ukraine as we have. That's why we're strong.
Thank you. Moving on to the Middle East. In October, Hamas attacked Israel, killing more than 1,000 people and taking hundreds of hostages. Among those held and thought to still be alive are 5 Americans. Israel's response has killed thousands of Palestinians and created a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. President Biden, you've put forward a proposal to resolve this conflict, but so far Hamas has not released the remaining hostages, and Israel is continuing its military offensive in Gaza. So what additional leverage will you use to get Hamas and Israel to end the war? You have 2 minutes.
Number one, everyone from the United Nations Security Council straight through to the G7 to the Israelis and Netanyahu himself have endorsed the plan I put forward. Which has 3 stages to it. The first stage is trade the hostages for a ceasefire. Second phase is a ceasefire with additional conditions. The third phase is the end of the war. The only one who wants the war to continue is Hamas, number one. They're the only ones standing out. We're still pushing hard to get them to accept. In the meantime, what's happened? In Israel, we're finding that the only thing I've denied Israel was 2,000-pound bombs. They don't work very well in populated areas. They kill a lot of innocent people. We're providing Israel with all the weapons they need and when they need them. And by the way, I'm the guy that organized the world against Iran when they had a full-blown intercontinental ballistic missile attack on Israel. No one was hurt. No one Israeli was accidentally killed, and it stopped. We saved Israel. We are the biggest producer of support for Israel of anyone in the world. And so there are 2 different things. Hamas cannot be allowed to be continued. We continue to send our experts and our intelligence people as to how they can get Hamas like we did bin Laden. You don't have to do it. And by the way, they've been greatly weakened, Hamas, greatly weakened, and they should be. They should be eliminated. But you've got to be careful for using certain weapons among population centers.
Just going back to Ukraine for 1 second. We have an ocean separating us. The European nations together have spent $100 billion or maybe more than that, less than us. Why doesn't he call them and say, you got to put up your money like I did with NATO? I got them to put up hundreds of billions of dollars. The Secretary General of NATO said Trump did the most incredible job I've ever seen. They wouldn't have any, they were going out of business. We were spending almost 100% of the money was paid by us. He didn't do that. He's getting you got to ask these people to put up the money. We're over $100 billion more spent, and it has a bigger impact on them because of location, because we have an ocean in between. You got to ask them. As far as Israel and Hamas, Israel's the one that wants to go. He said the only one that wants to keep going is Hamas. Actually, Israel is the one, and you should let him go and let him finish the job. He doesn't want to do it. He's become like a Palestinian, but they don't like him because he's a very bad Palestinian. He's a weak one.
President Biden, you have a minute.
I've never heard so much foolishness. This is a guy who wants to get out of NATO. Are you going to stay in NATO? He's going to pull out of NATO. The idea that our strength lies in our alliances as well. It may be a big ocean, but we're ever able to avoid a war in Europe, a major war in Europe? What happens if, in fact, you have Putin continue to go into NATO? We have an Article 5 agreement. Attack on one is attack on all. You want to start the nuclear war he keeps talking about, go ahead. Let Putin go in and control Ukraine and then move on to Poland and other places. See what happens then. He has no idea what the hell he's talking about. And by the way, I got 50 other nations around the world to support Ukraine, including Japan and South Korea, because they understand that this kind of dislocation has a serious threat to the whole world peace. No major war in Europe has ever been able to be contained just to Europe.
President Trump, just to follow up, would you support the creation of an independent Palestinian state in order to achieve peace in the region?
I'd have to see, but before we do that, the problem we have is that we spend all the money. So they kill us on trade. I made great trade deals with the European nations because if you add them up, they're about the same size economically. Their economy is about the same size as the United States. And they were no cars, they don't want anything that we have, but we're supposed to take their cars, their food, their everything, their agriculture. I changed that. But the big thing I changed is they don't want to pay. And the only reason that he can play games with NATO is because I got them to put up hundreds of billions of dollars. I said, and he's right about this, I said, no, I'm not going to support NATO if you don't pay. They asked me that question, would you guard us against Russia at a very secret meeting of the 28 states at that time, nations at that time? And I said, no, if you don't pay, I won't do that. And you know what happened? Billions and billions of dollars came flowing in the next day and the next months. But now we're in the same position. We're paying everybody's bills.
Let's turn to the issue of democracy. Former President Trump I want to ask you about January 6, 2021. After you rallied your supporters that day, some of them stormed the Capitol to stop the constitutionally mandated counting of electoral votes. As president, you swore an oath to, quote, preserve, protect, and defend, unquote, the Constitution. What do you say to voters who believe that you violated that oath through your actions and inaction on January 6th and worry that you'll do it again?
Well, I don't think too many believe that. And let me tell you about January 6th. On January 6th, we had a great border. Nobody coming through, very few. On January 6th, we were energy independent. On January 6th, we had the lowest taxes ever. We had the lowest regulations ever. On January 6th, we were respected all over the world. All over the world, we were respected. And then he comes in, and we're now laughed at. We're like a bunch of stupid people. What happened to the United States' reputation under this man's leadership is horrible, including weaponization, which I'm sure at some point you'll be talking about, where he goes after his political opponent because he can't beat him fair and square.
You have 80 seconds left. My question was, what do you say to those voters who believe that you violated your constitutional oath through your actions and inaction on January 6, 2021, and worry that you'll do it again?
Well, I didn't say that to anybody. I said peacefully and patriotically. And Nancy Pelosi, if you just watched the news from 2 days ago, on tape to her daughter, who's a documentary filmmaker, they say, but she's saying, oh, no, it's my responsibility. I was responsible for this. Because I offered her 10,000 soldiers or National Guard, and she turned them down. And the mayor in writing, by the way, the mayor, in writing, turned it down, the mayor of D.C. They turned it down. I offered 10,000 because I could see, I had virtually nothing to do. They asked me to go make a speech. I could see what was happening. Everybody was saying they're going to be there on January 6th. They're going to be there. And I said, you know what? There's a lot of people coming. You could feel it. You could feel it, too, and you could feel it. And I said, they ought to have some National Guard or whatever. And I offered it to her. And she now admits that she turned it down. And it was the same day she was, I don't know, she can't be very happy with her daughter because it made her into a liar. She said, I take full responsibility for January 6th.
President Biden?
Look, he encouraged those folks to go up on Capitol Hill, number one. I sat in the dining room off the Oval Office. He sat there for 3 hours watching, begging, being begged by his vice president and a number of his colleagues on the Republican side as well to do something, to call for a stop, to end it. Instead, they talked about these people being patriots and great patrons of America. In fact, he says he'll now forgive them for what they've done. They've been convicted. He says he wants to commute their sentences and say that no. But he went to every single court in the nation. I don't know how many cases, scores of cases, including the Supreme Court. And they said, no, this guy is responsible for doing what was done. He did do a damn thing. And these people should be in jail. And they should be the ones who are being held accountable. And he wants to let them all out. And now he says if he loses again, such a whiner that he is, that there could be a bloodbath.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
What they've done to some people that are so innocent, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. What you have done, how you've destroyed the lives of so many people. When they ripped down Portland, when they ripped down many other cities, you go to Minnesota, Minneapolis, what they've done there, with the fires all over the city. If I didn't bring in the National Guard, that city would have been destroyed. When you look at all of they took over big chunks of Seattle. I was all set to bring in the National Guard. They heard that. They saw them coming, and they left immediately. What he said about this whole subject is so off. Peacefully patriotic. One other thing. The Unselect Committee, which is basically two horrible Republicans that are all gone now, out of office, and Democrats, all Democrats, they destroyed and deleted all of the information they found because they found out we were right. We were right. And they deleted and destroyed all of the information. They should go to jail for that. If a Republican did that, they'd go to jail.
Thank you, President Trump. President Biden, I want to give you a minute.
The only person on this stage is a convicted felon is the man I'm looking at right now. And the fact of the matter is, what he's telling you is simply not true. The fact is that there was no effort on his part to stop what was going on up in Capitol Hill. And all those people, every one of those who were convicted, deserves to be convicted. The idea that they didn't kill somebody, just went in and broke down doors, broke the windows, occupied offices, turned over desks, turned them over statues. The idea that those people are patriots? Come on. When I asked him the first two debates we had, the debates we had first time around, I said, will you denounce the Proud Boys? He said, no, I'll tell them to stand by. The idea he's refusing, will you denounce these guys? Will you denounce the people we're talking about now? Will you denounce the people who attacked that Capitol? What are you going to do?
I'm going to give you a minute, President Trump, for a follow-up question I have. After a jury convicted you of 34 felonies last month, you said if reelected, you would, quote, have every right to go after, unquote, your political opponents. You just talked about members of the Select Committee on January 6th going to jail. Your main political opponent is standing on stage with you tonight. Can you clarify exactly what it means about you feeling you have every right to go after your political opponents?
Well, I said my retribution is going to be success. We're going to make this country successful again, because right now it's a failing nation. My retribution is going to be success. But when he talks about a convicted felon, his son is a convicted felon at a very high level. His son is convicted, going to be convicted probably numerous other times. Should have been convicted before, but his Justice Department let the statute of limitations lapse on the most important things. But he could be a convicted felon as soon as he gets out of office. Joe could be a convicted felon with all of the things that he's done. He's done horrible things. All of the death caused at the border, telling the Ukrainian people that we're going to want $1 billion or you change the prosecutor. Otherwise, you're not getting $1 billion. If I ever said that, that's quid pro quo. That we're not going to do anything. We're not going to give you $1 billion unless you change your prosecutor having to do with the son. This man is a criminal. This man, you're lucky. You're lucky. I did nothing wrong. We'd have a system that was rigged and disgusting. I did nothing wrong.
Thank you, President Trump. President Biden, you have said, I'm coming right to you, sir. You want to respond? Go ahead. I'll give you a minute to respond.
The idea that I did anything wrong relative to what you're talking about is outrageous. It's simply a lie, number one. Number two, the idea that you have a right to seek retribution against any American just because you're president is wrong. It's simply wrong. No president's ever spoken like that before. No president in our history has spoken like that before. Number three, the crimes that you are still charged with, and think of all the civil penalties you have. How many billions of dollars do you owe in civil penalties for molesting a woman in public, for doing a whole range of things, of having sex with a porn star on the night while your wife was pregnant? I mean, what are you talking about? You have the morals of an alley cat.
Give you a minute, sir.
I didn't have sex with a porn star, number one. Number two, that was a case that was started and moved. They moved a high-ranking official, a DOJ, into the Manhattan DA's office to start that case. That case is going to be appealed and won. We had a very terrible judge, a horrible judge, Democrat. The prosecutor were all high-ranking Democrats, appointed people, and both the civil and the criminal. He basically went after his political opponent because he thought it was going to damage me. But when the public found out about these cases, because they understand it better than he does, he has no idea what these cases are. But when they found out about these cases, you know what they did? My poll numbers went up, way up. You know that because you're reporting it. And we took in more money in the last 2 weeks than we've ever taken in the history of any campaign. I don't think any campaign has ever taken. Hundreds of millions of dollars came pouring in because the public knows it's a scam and it's a guy that's after his political opponent because he can't win fair and square.
Thank you, President Trump. President Biden, you have said, quote, Donald Trump and his MAGA Republicans are determined to destroy American democracy. Do you believe that the tens of millions of Americans who are likely to vote for President Trump will be voting against American democracy?
The more they know about what he's done, yes. The more they know about what he's done. And there's a lot more coming. He's got a lot of cases down the road coming around. He's got a whole range of issues he has to face. I don't know what the juries will do, but I do know he has a real problem. And so the fact that, could you ever think you hear any president say that I'm going to seek retribution? Do you ever hear any president say that I thought Hitler had some good ideas? What got me involved to run in the first place after my son had died, I decided in Iraq, because of Iraq, I said I wasn't going to run again until I saw what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia. People coming out of the woods carrying swastikas on torches, and singing the same anti-Semitic bile they sang when back in Germany, and and the young woman got killed. I spoke to the mother, and they asked him. They said, "What do you think of those people? The the ones who got killed, the one who tried to stop it, and the ones," he said, "I think they're fine people on both sides." What American president would ever say Nazis coming out of fields carrying torches, singing the same anti-Semitic bile, carrying swastikas were fine people? And this is the guy who says Hitler's done some good things. I'd like to know what they are. The good things Hitler's done, that's what he said. This guy has no sense of American democracy.
President Trump.
Jake, both of you know that story has been totally wiped out, because when you see the sentence, it said 100% exoneration on that story. He just keeps it going. He says he ran because of Charlottesville. He didn't run because of Charlottesville. He ran because it was his last chance. He's not equipped to be president. You know it, and I know it. It's ridiculous. We have a debate. We're trying to justify his presidency. His presidency, he's without question the worst presidency in the history of our country. We shouldn't be having a debate about it. There's nothing to debate. He made up the Charlottesville story, and you'll see it's debunked all over the place. Every reasonable anchor has debunked it. And just the other day it came out where it was fully debunked. It's a nonsense story. He knows that, and he didn't run because of Charlottesville. He used that as an excuse to run.
President Biden.
And debunked. It happened. All you have to do is listen to what was said at the time. And the idea that somehow that's the only reason I ran. I ran because I was worried a guy like this guy could get elected. If he thought they were good people coming out of that forest, carrying those woods, carrying those torches, then he didn't deserve to be president. Didn't deserve to be president at all. And the idea that he's talking about all this being fabricated, we saw with our own eyes. We saw what happened on January 6th. We saw the people breaking through the windows. We saw people occupying his own vice president. Look, there's a reason why 40 of his 44 top cabinet officers refused to endorse him this time. His vice president hasn't endorsed him this time. So why? Why? They know him well. They serve with him. Why are they not endorsing him?
Thank you, President Biden. We're going to be right back with more from the CNN presidential debate.
There is a storm coming, an event like the world has never seen before. The emerging event will have little to do with weather, but more about developing situations that were foreseen many years ago. We have always warned you during severe weather and news events that affected many. Now, Channel 1 Atlanta begins a new series to warn you about what's coming soon and make sure you are prepared. Join us on a new journey, as according to a recent survey, a lot of people believe we are living in the last days. Current news events show us now more than ever. In history, time is setting the stage for the coming storm. A new series, now playing only on Channel 1 Atlanta.
Again, a confirmed tornado on the ground in downtown Conyers. This is a very dangerous and life-threatening weather event. Get into the interior section of your house, away from windows or a basement if you have. And there's the debris right there in the Millstead area near the Rockdale Medical Center. Right. Channel 1 Atlanta.
Welcome back to the CNN presidential debate live from Georgia. Let's talk about persistent challenges you both faced in your first terms and you'd certainly face again in a second term. President Biden, while black unemployment dropped to a record low under your presidency, black families still earn far less than white families. Black mothers are still 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes, and black Americans are imprisoned at 5 times the rate of white Americans. What do you say to black voters who are disappointed that you haven't made more progress?
They acknowledge they made a lot of progress, number one. The fact of the matter is there's more small black businesses that have been started than any time in history. Number two, the wages of black unemployment is the lowest level it's been in a long, long time. Number three, we're providing housing for black Americans and dealing with the segregation that exists among these corporations that collude to keep people out of their houses. And in addition to that, we find that the impact on the choice that black families have to make relative to child care is incredibly difficult. When we did the first major piece of legislation in the past, I was able to reduce black child care costs. I cut them in half. We got to make sure we provide for child care costs. We got to make sure, because when you provide those child care protections, you increase economic growth because more people can be in the job market. So there's more to be done, considerably more to be done. But we've done a great deal so far, and I'm not letting up, and they know it.
You have 49 seconds left. What do you say to black voters who are disappointed with the progress so far?
I say I don't blame them for being disappointed. Inflation is still hurting them badly. For example, I provided for the idea that any black family, first-time home buyer, should get a $10,000 tax credit to be able to buy their first home so they can get started. I made sure that we're in a situation where all those black families and those black individuals who had to take out student loans that were ballooning, that if they were engaged in nursing, and anything having to do with volunteerism, if they paid their bills for 10 years on their student debt, all the rest is forgiven after 10 years. Millions have benefited from that. And we're going to do a whole lot more for black families.
Thank you, President Trump.
And he caused the inflation. He's blaming inflation, and he's right, it's been very bad. He caused the inflation, and it's killing black families and Hispanic families and just about everybody. It's killing people. They can't buy groceries anymore. They can't. You look at the cost of food where it's doubled and tripled and quadrupled. They can't live. They're not living anymore. He caused this inflation. I gave him a country with essentially no inflation. It was perfect. It was so good. All he had to do is leave it alone. He destroyed it with his Green New scam and all this money that's being thrown out the window. He caused inflation. As sure as you're sitting there, the fact is that his big kill on the black people is the millions of people that he's allowed to come in through the border. They're taking black jobs now. And it could be 18, it could be 19, and even 20 million people. They're taking black jobs, and they're taking Hispanic jobs, and you haven't seen it yet, but you're going to see something that's going to be the worst in our history.
Thank you. President Biden?
There was no inflation when I became president. You know why? The economy was flat on its back. 15% unemployment. He decimated the economy, absolutely decimated the economy. That's why there was no inflation at the time. There were no jobs. We provided thousands and millions of jobs for individuals who are in all communities, including minority communities. We made sure that they have health insurance. We have covered, the ACA has increased. I made sure that they're $8,000 per person in a family to get written off for health care. But this guy wants to eliminate that. They tried 50 times. He wants to get rid of the ACA again, and they're going to try again if they win. You find ourselves in a position where the idea that we're not doing anything, we put more police on the street than any administration has. He wants to cut the cops. We're providing for equity and making sure people have a shot to make it. There's a lot going on, but in inflation, he caused it by his tremendous malfeasance in the way he handled the pandemic.
Thank you. Another persistent challenge is the climate crisis. 2023 was the hottest year in recorded history, and communities across the country are confronting the devastating effects of extreme heat, intensifying wildfires, stronger hurricanes, and rising sea levels. Former President Trump, you've vowed to end your opponent's climate initiatives, but will you take any action as president to slow the climate crisis?
Well, let me just go back to what he said about the police, how close the police are to him. Almost every police group in the nation from every state is supporting Donald J. Trump. Almost every police group. And what he's done to the black population is horrible, including the fact that for 10 years he called them super predators. We can't, in the 1990s, we can't forget that. Super predators was his name, and he called it to them for 10, and they've taken great offense at it, and now they see it happening. But when they see what I did for criminal justice reform and for the historically black colleges and universities, where I funded them and got them all funded, and the opportunity zones with Tim, as you know, Tim Scott was incredible. He did a great job, great senator from South Carolina. He came to me with the idea, and it was a great idea. It's one of the most successful economic development acts ever in the country, opportunity zones. And the biggest beneficiary are blacks. And that's why we have the best numbers with them in maybe ever. They're saying ever. I read this morning where ever, the best numbers. He's lost much of the black population because he's done a horrible job for black people. He's also done a horrible job for Hispanics. But wait till you see these millions of people pouring into our country, and they're going to take the jobs, and it's already started, and you haven't seen anything yet. It's a disaster.
You've 38 seconds left. President Trump, will you take any action as president to slow the climate crisis?
So I want absolutely immaculate clean water, and I want absolutely clean air, and we had it. We had H2O. We had the best numbers ever, and we were using all forms of energy, all forms, everything. And yet, during my 4 years, I had the best environmental numbers ever. And my top environmental people gave me that statistic just before I walked on the stage, actually.
I don't know where the hell he's been. The idea that anything he said is true. I've passed the most extensive climate change legislation in history. We find ourselves, and by the way, black colleges. I came up with $15 billion for HBCUs, historic black universities and colleges, because they don't have the kind of contributors that they have to build these laboratories and the like. Any black student is capable in college of doing what any white student can do. They just have the money, but now they'll be able to get those jobs in high tech. We're in a situation where the idea that he is claiming to have done something that had the cleanest water, he hadn't done a damn thing for the environment. He pulled out of the Paris Peace Accord, Climate Accord. I immediately joined it because if we reach 1.5 degrees Celsius at any one point, there's no way back. The only existential threat to humanity is climate change, and he didn't do a damn thing about it. He wants to undo all that I've done.
The Paris Accord was going to cost us $1 trillion, and China nothing, and Russia nothing, and India nothing. It was a ripoff of the United States. And I ended it because I didn't want to waste that money because they treat us horribly. We were the only ones who was costing us money. Nobody else was paying into it. And it was a disaster. But everything that he said just now, I'll give you an example. I heard him say before insulin. I'm the one that got the insulin down for the seniors. I took care of the seniors. What he's doing is destroying all of our medical programs because the migrants coming in, they want everybody. And look, I have the biggest heart on the stage, I guarantee you that. And I want to take care of people. But we're destroying our country. They're taking over our schools, our hospitals, and they're going to be taking over Social Security. He is destroying Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
Where this guy comes from. The idea is that we, in fact, we were the only ones of consequence who were not members of the Paris Accord. How can we do anything if we're not able to, the United States can't get its pollution under control? One of the largest polluters in the world, number one. We're making significant progress. By 2035, we will have cut pollution in half. We have made significant progress, and we're continuing to make progress. We set up a climate corps for thousands of young people will learn how to deal with climate, just like the Peace Corps. And we're moving in directions that are going to significantly change the elements of cause of pollution. But the idea that he claims that he has the biggest heart up here and he's really concerned about pollution and about climate. I've not seen any indication of that. And by the way, with regard to prescription drugs, one company agreed that they would reduce the price to $35, which I was calling for, one, voluntarily. I made sure every company in the world, every pharmaceutical company, cannot have to pay.
Thank you.
And by the way,
So every day, millions of Americans struggle just to make ends meet. For many older Americans, Social Security provides a critical lifeline. President Biden, if nothing is done to Social Security, seniors will see their benefits cut in just over 10 years. Will you name tonight one specific step that you're willing to take to keep Social Security solvent?
yes, make the very wealthy begin to pay their fair share. Right now, everybody making under $170,000 pays 6% of their income, of their paycheck, every single time they get a paycheck from the time of the first one they get when they're 18 years old. The idea that they're going to, I've been proposing that everybody, they pay, the millionaires pay 1%. So no one I would not raise the cost of Social Security for anybody under $400,000. After that, I began to make the wealthy begin to pay their fair share by increasing from 1% beyond to be able to guarantee the program for life.
So you still have 82 seconds left. Are there any other measures that you think that would be able to help keep Social Security solvent, or is that one enough?
Well, no, that one enough will keep it solvent, but the biggest thing I'll do if we defeat this man, because he wants to get rid of Social Security. He thinks there's plenty to cut in Social Security. He's wanting to cut Social Security and Medicare, both times. And and if you look at the program put forward by the House Republican caucus that I believe supports, is in fact want to cut it as well. The idea that we don't need to protect our seniors is ridiculous. And by the way, the American public has greater health care coverage today than ever before. And on the ACA, as I said, you're in a circumstance where 400,000 people, 40 million people would not have insurance because they have a pre-existing condition. Only thing that allows them to have that insurance is the fact that they, in fact, are part of the ACA. And by the way, the other thing is, we're in a situation where we talk about education for black communities. I've raised the amount of money for Pell Grants by another $8,000. So anybody making under $70,000 a year is going to be able to get $15,000 toward their tuition. He just doesn't know what he's talking about.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump.
So I've dealt with politicians all my life. I've been on this side of the equation for the last 8 years. I've never seen anybody lie like this guy. He lies. I've never seen it. He can look you in the face. About so many other things, too. And we mentioned the laptop. We mentioned Russia, Ukraine. Everything he does is a lie. It's misinformation and disinformation. The losers and suckers story that he made up is a total lie on the military. It's a disgrace. But Social Security, he's destroying it because millions of people are pouring into our country, and they're putting them onto Social Security. They're putting them onto Medicare, Medicaid. They're putting them in our hospitals. They're taking the place of our citizens. What they're doing to the VA, to our veterans, is unbelievable. Our veterans are living in the street, and these people are living in luxury hotels. He doesn't know what he's doing, and it's really coming back. I've never seen such anger in our country before.
President Biden.
The idea that veterans are not being taken care of, I told you before. And by the way, when I said suckers and losers, he acknowledged after that he fired that general. That general got fired because he's the one that acknowledged that that's what he said. He was the one standing with Trump when he said it, number one. Number two, the idea that we're going to be in a situation where all these millions and millions, the way he talks about it, illegal aliens are coming into the country and taking away our jobs. There's a reason why we have the fastest growing economy in the world, the reason why we have the most successful economy in the world. We're doing better than any other nation in the world. And by the way, those 15 Nobel laureates he talked about being phony, those 15 Nobel laureates, economists, they all said that if Trump is reelected, we're likely to have a recession. And inflation is going to increasingly go up. And by the way, worst president in history, 159 presidential scholars voted him the worst president in the history of the United States of America.
President Biden, thank you so much. Let's turn to the cost of child care, which many American families struggle to afford. President Trump, both you and President Biden have tried to address this issue, but the average cost of child care in this country has risen to more than $11,000 a year per child. For many families, the cost of child care for 2 children is more than their rent. In your second term, what would you do to make child care more affordable?
Just to go back, the general got fired because he was no good. And if he said that, that's why he made it up. But we have 19 people that said I didn't say it, and they're very highly respected, much more so than him. The other thing is, he doesn't fire people. He never fired people. I've never seen him fire anybody. I did fire a lot. I fired Comey because he was no good. I fired a lot of the top people at the FBI, drained the swamp. They were no good. Not easy to fire people. You'd pay a price for it, but they were no good. I inherited these people. I didn't put them there. I didn't put Comey there. He was no good. I fired him. This guy hasn't fired anybody. He never fires. He should have fired every military man that was involved with that the Afghanistan horror show, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. He didn't fire. Did you fire anybody? Did you fire anybody that's on the border, that's allowed us to have the worst border in the history of the world? Did anybody get fired for allowing 18 million people, many from prisons, many from mental institutions? Did you fire anybody that allowed our country to be destroyed? Joe, our country is being destroyed as you and I sit up here and waste a lot of time on this debate. This shouldn't be a debate. He is the worst president. He just said about me because I said it. But look, he's the worst president in the history of our country. He's destroyed our country. Now all of a sudden he's trying to get a little tough on the border. He came out with a nothing deal, and it reduced it a little bit, like this much. It's insignificant. He wants open borders. He wants our country to either be destroyed or he wants to pick up those people as voters. And I don't think we just can't let it happen. If he wins this election, our country doesn't have a chance, not even a chance, of coming out of this rut. We probably won't have a country left anymore. That's how bad it is. He is the worst in history by far.
Thank you, President Trump. President Biden?
We're the most admired country in the world. We're the United States of America. There's nothing beyond our capacity. We have the finest military in the history of the world, the finest in the history of the world. No one thinks we're weak. No one wants to screw around with us. Nobody, number one. Number two, the idea that we're talking about worst presidents. I wasn't joking. Look it up or go online. 159 or 58, don't hold me the exact number, presidential historians, they've had meetings and they voted who's the worst president in American history, one through best to worst. They said he was the worst in all of American history. That's a fact. That's not conjecture. He can argue they're wrong, but that's what they voted. The idea that he is doing anything to deal with child care, he did virtually nothing to child care. We should significantly increase the child care tax credit. We should significantly increase the availability of women and men or single parents to be able to go back to work. And we should encourage businesses to have.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump, the question was about what would you do to make child care more affordable, if you want to take your minute.
Just so you understand, we have polling, we have other things that they rate him the worst because what he's done is so bad. And they rate me, I'll show you, I will show you. And they rate me one of the best, okay? And if I'm given another 4 years, I will be the best. I think I'll be the best. Nobody's ever created an economy like us. Nobody ever cut taxes like us. He's the only one I know. He wants to raise your taxes by 4 times. He wants to raise everybody's taxes by 4 times. He wants the Trump tax cuts to expire. So everybody, including the two of you, are going to pay 4 to 5 times. Nobody ever heard of this before. All my life, I'd grow up and I'd see politicians talking about cutting taxes. When we cut taxes, as I said, we did more business. Apple and all these companies, they were bringing money back into our country. The worst president in history by far, and everybody knows it.
President Biden?
Look, the fact of the matter is that he's dead wrong about, he's increased the tariff, he will increase the taxes on middle-class people. I said I'd never raise a tax on anybody making less than $400,000. I didn't. But this tariff is 10% tariffs. Everything coming into the country, you know what the economists say? That's going to cost the average American $2,500 a year more because they're going to have to pay the difference in food and all the things that were imported. Number two, he's in a situation where he talks about how he has not raised, he somehow helped the middle class. The middle class have been devastated by you. Now you want a new tax cut of $5 trillion over the next 10 years, which is going to fundamentally bankrupt the country. You had the largest deficit of any president in American history, number one. Number two, you have not, in fact, made any contact, any progress with China. We are at the lowest trade deficit with China since 2010.
Thank you, President Biden.
You lost
Thank you, President Biden. Let's discuss an epidemic impacting millions of Americans that both of you have made a top priority in your first term, the opioid crisis. And for both of you, the number of overdose deaths in this country has gone up. Under your term, it went up. Under your term, it has gone up. Former President Trump, despite the efforts that both of you have made, more than 100,000 Americans are dying from overdoses every year, primarily from fentanyl and other opioids. What will you do to help Americans right now in the throes of addiction who are struggling to get the treatment they need?
To finish up, we now have the largest deficit in the history of our country under this guy. We have the largest deficit with China. He gets paid by China. He's a Manchurian candidate. He gets money from China. So I think he's afraid to deal with them or something. But do you notice he never took out my tariffs because we bring in so much money. Numbers. Then he came along. The numbers, have you seen the numbers now? It's not only the 18 million people that I believe is even low because the gotaways, they don't even talk about gotaways. But the numbers of the amount of drugs and human trafficking in women coming across our border, the worst thing I've ever seen, at numbers that nobody's ever seen under him because the border's so bad. But the number of drugs coming across our border now is the largest we've ever had by far.
President Trump, thank you. President Biden?
Fentanyl and the byproducts of fentanyl went down for a while. And I wanted to make sure we use the machinery that can detect fentanyl, these big machines that roll over everything that comes across the border. And it costs a lot of money. That was part of this deal we put together, this bipartisan deal. More fentanyl machines, more be able to detect drugs, more numbers of agents, more numbers of all the people at the border. And when we had that deal done, he called his Republican colleagues, said, don't do it. It's going to hurt me politically. No, he never argued it's not a good bill. It's a really good bill. We need those machines. We need those machines. And we're coming down very hard in every country in Asia in terms of precursors for fentanyl. And Mexico is working with us to make sure they don't have the technology to be able to put it together. That's what we have to do. We need those machines.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump, and again, the question is about Americans in the throes of addiction right now struggling to get the treatment they need.
Well, this does pertain to it. He ended Remain in Mexico. He ended catch and release. I made it catch and release in Mexico, not catch and release here. We had so many things that we had done, hard negotiations with Mexico, and I got it all for nothing. It's just like when you have a hostage. We always pay $6 billion for a hostage. Every time we say it's a hostage. Now we have a hostage, a Wall Street Journal reporter, I think a good guy, and he's over there because Putin is laughing at this guy, probably asking for billions of dollars for the reporter. I will have him out very quickly, as soon as I take office. Before I take office, I said by literally as soon as I win the election, I will have that reporter out. He should have had him out a long time ago, but Putin's probably asking for billions and billions of dollars because this guy pays it every time. We had 2 cases where he paid $6 billion for 5 people. I got 58 people out, and I paid essentially nothing.
Thank you, President Trump. Dana?
Let's turn to concerns that voters have about each of you. President Biden, you would be 86 at the end of your second term. How do you address concerns about your capability to handle the toughest job in the world well into your 80s?
Well, first of all, I spent half my career being criticized being the youngest person in politics. I was the second youngest person ever elected to the United States Senate, and now I'm the oldest. This guy's 3 years younger and a lot less competent. I think that just look at the record. Look at what I've done. Look how I've turned around the horrible situation he left me. As I said, 15 million new jobs, 800,000 manufacturing jobs, more investment in America, over billions of dollars in private investment in enterprises that we are growing. By the way, we brought an awful lot of people. The whole idea of computer chips, we used to have 40% of the market. We invented those chips, and we lost it because he was sending people to find the cheapest jobs overseas and to bring home a product. So I went to South Korea. I convinced Samsung to invest billions of dollars here in the United States. And guess what? Those fabs, they call that to build these chips, those fabs pay over $100,000. You don't need a college degree for them. And there's billions, about $40 billion already being invested and being built right now in the United States, creating significant jobs for Americans from all over the world.
President Biden, you have 40 seconds left. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I would. The idea that somehow we are this failing country. I never heard a president talk like this before. We're the envy of the world. Name me a single major country president who wouldn't trade places with the United States of America for all our problems and all our opportunities. We're the most progressive country in the world in getting things done. We're the strongest country in the world. We're a country in the world who keeps our word, and everybody trusts us, all of our allies, and those who he coddles up to, from Kim Jong-un, he sends love letters to, and Putin, etc. They don't want to screw around with us.
Thank you. Former President Trump, to follow up, you would be 82 at the end of your second term. What do you say to voters who have concerns about your capabilities to serve?
Well, I took 2 tests, cognitive tests. I aced them, both of them, as you know. We made it public. He took none. I'd like to see him take one, just one, a real easy one. Like go through the first 5 questions. He couldn't do it. But I took 2 cognitive tests. I took physical exams every year. And, you know, we knock on wood wherever we may have wood, that I'm in very good health. I just won 2 club championships, not even senior, 2 regular club championships. To do that, you have to be quite smart, and you have to be able to hit the ball a long way. And I do it. He doesn't do it. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. He challenged me to a golf match. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. I think I'm in very good shape. I feel that I'm as in good a shape as I was 25, 30 years ago. Actually, I'm probably a little bit lighter, but I'm in as good a shape as I was years ago. I feel very good. I feel the same. But I was willing to take a cognitive test. And you know what? If I didn't do well, I aced them. Dr. Ronnie Jackson, who's a great guy when he was White House doctor. And then I took another one, a similar one. And one of them said they'd never seen anybody ace him.
Thank you. President Biden?
You can see he is 6'5" and only 223 pounds, or 235 pounds. Well, you said 6'4", 200. Well, anyway, anyway, just take a look at what he says he is, and take a look at what he is. Look, I'd be happy to have a driving contest with him. I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. But by the way, I told you before, I'm happy to play golf if you carry your own bag. Think you can do it?
That's the biggest lie. He's a 6 handicap of all.
I was an 8 handicap.
Yeah.
8.
Never.
But I have, you know how many?
I've seen you swing. I know you swing.
Let's
not act like children.
President Trump, we're going to turn
Let's not act like children.
to a specific concern that voters have about you. Will you pledge tonight that once all legal challenges have been exhausted, that you will accept the results of this election, regardless of who wins, and you will say right now that political violence in any form is unacceptable?
Well, I shouldn't have to say that, but of course I believe that. It's totally unacceptable. And if you would see my statements that I made on Twitter at the time, and also my statement that I made in the Rose Garden, you would say it's one of the strongest statements you've ever seen. In addition to the speech I made in front of, I believe, the largest crowd I've ever spoken to, and I will tell you, nobody ever talks about that. They talk about a relatively small number of people that went to the Capitol, and in many cases were ushered in by the police. And as Nancy Pelosi said, it was her responsibility, not mine. She said that loud and clear. But the answer is, if the election is fair, free, and I want that more than anybody. And I'll tell you something. I wish he was a great president, because I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be at one of my many places enjoying myself. I wouldn't be under indictment because I wouldn't have been his political opponent, because he indicted me because I was his opponent. I wish he was a great president. I would rather have that. I wouldn't be here. I don't mind being here. But the only reason I'm here is he's so bad as a president that I'm going to make America great again. We're going to make America great again. We're a failing nation right now. We're a seriously failing nation. And we're a failing nation because of him. His policies are so bad. His military policies are insane. They're insane. These are wars that will never end with him. He will drive us into World War III, and we're closer to World War III than anybody can imagine. We are very, very close to World War III, and he's driving us there. And Kim Jong-un and President Xi of China, Kim Jong-un of North Korea, all of these, Putin, they don't respect him. They don't fear him. They have nothing going with this gentleman, and he's going to drive us into World War III.
You want a World War III, let him follow and win, and let Putin say, do what you want, NATO. Just do what you want. There's a thing called Article 5. An attack on one is an attack on all, and required response. The idea, I can't think of a single major leader in the world who wouldn't trade places with the job I've done and what they've done. Because we are a powerful nation. We have wonderful people. It's because of the people, not me. It's because of the American people. They're capable of anything, and they step up when they're needed. And right now, we're needed. We're needed to protect the world because our own safety is at stake. And again, you want to have a war, just let Putin go ahead and take Kyiv, make sure they move on, see what happens in Poland, Hungary, and other places along that border. Then you have a war.
President Trump, as I come back to you for a follow-up, the question was, will you accept the results of this election, regardless of who wins?
Just to finish what he said, if I might, Russia, they took a lot of land from Bush. They took a lot of land from Obama and Biden. They took no land, nothing from Trump, nothing. He knew not to do it. He's not going to play games with me. He knew that. I got along with him very well, but he knew not to play games. He took nothing from me. But now he's going to take the whole thing from this man right here. That's a war that should have never started. It would have never started, ever, with me. And he's going to take Ukraine. And, you know, you asked me a question before, would you do this? He's got us in such a bad position right now with Ukraine and Russia, because Ukraine's not winning that war. He said, I will never settle until such time. They're running out of people. They're running out of soldiers. They've lost so many people. It's so sad. They've lost so many people, and they've lost those gorgeous cities with the golden domes that are 1,000 years old, all because of him and stupid decisions. Russia would have never attacked if I were
President Trump,
president.
the question was, will you accept the results of the election, regardless of who wins? Yes or no, please.
If it's a fair and legal and good election, absolutely. I would have much rather accepted these, but the fraud and everything else was ridiculous. And if you want, we'll have a news conference on it in a week, or we'll have another one of these in a week. But I will absolutely, there's nothing I'd rather do. It would be much easier for me to do that than I'm running again. I wasn't really going to run until I saw the horrible job he did. He's destroying our country. I would be very happy to be someplace else, in a nice location someplace. And again, no indictments, no political opponent stuff, because it's the only way he thinks he can win. But unfortunately, it's driven up my numbers and driven them up to a very high level because the people understand it.
Well, let's see what your numbers are when this election is over. Let's see. You're a whiner. When you lost the first time, you continued, you appealed and appealed to courts all across the country. Not one single court in America said any of your claims had any merit. state or local, none. But you continue to provoke this lie about somehow there's all this misrepresentation, all this stealing. There is no evidence of that at all. And I tell you what, I doubt whether you'll accept it because you're such a whiner. The idea if you lose again, you accepting anything, you can't stand the loss. Something snapped in you when you lost the last time.
We'll be right back with more from the CNN presidential debate, live from Georgia.
There is a storm coming, an event like the world has never seen before. The emerging event will have little to do with weather, but more about developing
It is now time for the
situations
candidates
that
to
were
deliver
foreseen.
their closing statements as predetermined by a coin toss. We're going to begin with you, President Biden. You have 2 minutes.
We've made significant progress from the debacle that was left by President Trump in his last term. We find ourselves in a situation where, number one, we have to make sure that we have a fair tax system. I ask anyone out there in the audience or anyone out watching this debate, do you think the tax system is fair? The fact is that I said nobody even making under $400,000 had a single penny increase in their taxes and will not. And if I'm reelected, that'll be the case again. But this guy has increased your taxes because of the deficit, number one. He's increased inflation because of the debacle he left after the way he handled the pandemic. And he finds himself in a position where he now wants to tax you more by putting a 10% tariff on everything that comes into the United States of America. What I did, when, for example, he wants to get rid of the ability of Medicare for us to be able to negotiate drug prices with the big pharma companies. Well, guess what? We got it down to $35 for insulin instead of $400. No more than $2,000 for every senior, no matter how much prescription they need. You know what that did? That reduced the federal debt by $160 billion over 10 years because the government doesn't have to pay the exorbitant prices. I'm going to make that available to every senior all along. It's happening now, and everybody in America. He wants to get rid of that. I'm going to make sure that we have child care. We're going to significantly increase the credit people have for child care. I'm going to make sure we do something about what we're doing on lead pipes and all the things that are causing health problems for people across the country. We're going to continue to fight to bring down inflation and give people a break.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump, you now have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Like so many politicians, this man is just a complainer. He said, we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to get rid of this tax, that tax. But he doesn't do anything. All he does is make our country unsafe by allowing millions and millions of people to pour in. Our military doesn't respect him. We look like fools in Afghanistan. We didn't stop Israel. It was such a horrible thing that would have never happened. It should have never happened. Iran was broke. Anybody that did business with Iran, including China, they couldn't do business with the United States. They all passed. Iran was broke. They had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah, for terror, no money whatsoever. Again, Ukraine should have never happened. He talks about all this stuff, but he didn't do it. For 3.5 years, we're living in hell. We have the Palestinians and we have everybody else rioting all over the place. You talk about Charlottesville. This is 100 times Charlottesville, 1,000 times. The whole country is exploding because of you, because they don't respect you, and they have to respect their president, and they don't respect you throughout the world. What we did was incredible. We rebuilt the military. We got the largest tax cut in history, the largest regulation cut in history. The reason he's got jobs is because I cut the regulations that gave jobs, but he's putting a lot of those regulations back on. All of the things that we've done, nobody's never seen anything like. Even from a medical standpoint, right to try, where we can try space-age materials instead of going to Asia or going to Europe and trying to get when you're terminally ill. Now you can go and you can get something. You sign a document. They've been trying to get it for 42 years. But you know what we did for the military was incredible. Choice for our soldiers, where our soldiers, instead of waiting for 3 months to see a doctor, can go out and get themselves fixed up and readied up and take care of themselves, and they're living. And that's why I had the highest approval rating in the history of the VA. So all of these things, we're in a failing nation, but it's not going to be failing anymore. We're going to make it great again.
Thank you, former President Trump, President Biden. Stay with us because we have full analysis of this debate. Anderson Cooper and Aaron Burnett starts now on CNN.
President and former president making their way off the CNN debate stage. Looks like Jill Biden, the First Lady, has come out. Former President Trump walking off the stage. The first debate of the 2024 campaign and the earliest presidential debate ever now in the books and in front of the voters. Tonight, along with Aaron Burnett, the first word on what those voters might make of it from our political professionals, from our CNN Flash Poll and Swing State Focus Group. We'll be talking to surrogates, including Vice President Harris, getting fact checks from our Daniel Dale and new reporting from inside both campaigns. With me here, CNN political commentator Scott Jennings, Kate Bedingfield, David Urban, Van Jones, Alyssa Farr Griffin, and Newsnight anchor Abby Phillip, and David Axelrod, and CNN chief national correspondent John King. John, let me start with you. Your thoughts.
Anderson, this was a game-changing debate in the sense that right now, as we speak, there is a deep, a wide, and a very aggressive panic in the Democratic Party. It started minutes into the debate, and it continues right now. It involves party strategists, it involves elected officials, it involves fundraisers. And they're having conversations about the president's performance, which they think was dismal, which they think will hurt other people down the party in the ticket, and they're having conversations about what they should do about it. Some of those conversations include, should we go to the White House and ask the president to step aside? Other of the conversations are about, should prominent Democrats go public with that call? Because they feel this debate was so terrible. They do say, in moments in the debate later, the president got better and got his footing, but then at the end, even his closing statement was a little halting. The contrast between the two candidates. Let me be clear. None of them, and a lot of Republicans, don't think Donald Trump had a great night. Donald Trump broke the fact-check machine more than I can count tonight. That will be on the record as we go forward. He refused to answer some very specific and direct questions about his conduct, about January 6th and what all. So that will be dealt with out there. And sometimes there's a parallel universe between the political elites and the American people. It'd be nice to see what the voters say. But I can tell you, it started minutes in. It started with the first couple of answers, and it has continued throughout the night from a, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, to what do we do about this? And it involves very senior people in the Democratic Party, including elected officials, saying we have a problem.
And just to co-sign what John is saying, I mean, the panic that I am hearing from Democrats is not like anything that I have heard in this campaign so far. And a lot of it has to do with, first of all, there was a deep frustration about Trump's lies. I mean, he lied a lot tonight. But the problem for Biden was that Trump was able to take sometimes incredible falsehoods and turn them into some kind of argument, whereas Biden's answers were, in a lot of cases, not coherent. Deeply problematic that he was not able to take pretty straightforward answers and answer them to the American public, and then also at some points bringing things up that teed up Trump attacks. So there's a real concern here tonight that there's been some real damage done that cannot be undone. Biden solidified the perception among voters, but especially among his base. They were hoping that tonight would be a game changer. They are now seeing a president who is in the White House, who they do not necessarily believe can do this for another 4 years.
David Axelrod?
Look, I can't argue with either of them about how Democratic leaders are reacting to this poll. We said at the beginning that each person had a fundamental goal, and for Biden, that goal was to appear energetic in especially to you two guys, if for whatever reason there's a change at the top of the ticket, you guys are in trouble with Donald Trump, because the guy who was up there tonight is not a guy who's going to inspire people. He did not show in any way that he has changed from the guy who people don't have a very positive opinion of for a lot of good reasons.
I think Donald Trump won several policy exchanges tonight. I think he did well on immigration. I think he did well on the economy. I think he did well on inflation. I think he went back to Afghanistan as he should have. The thing he did not do was, after he realized that he had Biden beaten on policy and on image, he should have turned the page and sounded an optimistic note about what we can become as a people and as a country. He did not do that. He continued to pummel Joe Biden all night. I understand what you're saying, but at the end of the night, very few things about the policy exchanges is going to be remembered. People are going to remember Joe Biden. They're going to remember him shuffling out. They're going to remember him staring blankly into the camera. They're going to remember him looking down, losing his train of thought. And they're going to remember that everything I thought I knew, but the White House told me don't believe my own eyes, is actually true.
But that's not what I'm saying. What I said, Scott, was if Joe Biden were not the candidate, if there was another candidate, I think Donald Trump would be in deep trouble.
But if I may, that is such a sad state of affairs. Something I was consistently hearing is, what a bad debate, in the sense that Donald Trump lied throughout. He misrepresented. He tried to turn away from key points that he should have given answers on, and kept deflecting. With any normal generic Democrat next to him, I don't think he would have won the night. But you put somebody who was suffering from the moment that they got out. It was hard to watch. I had to occasionally look away because it was so uncomfortable. I think America deserves better than the options that are in front of them. It's really devastating. And by the way, our allies are watching.
Yeah, look, I mean, the way that I would try to phrase it if I were less emotional is Biden stuttered, but he told the truth. He looked terrible, but his policies were good. Trump spoke plainly, but he lied the whole time. And he looked good, but his policies were terrible. I mean, he's going to do nothing on climate change. He was hugging the cactus on abortion. I mean, his policies are terrible. So you have somebody who probably shouldn't be president, and you have somebody who cannot be president in terms of what Donald Trump represents. So we have a problem as a country now, and this might be an opportunity for people to come together and figure this out, because neither one of those people right now are inspiring the confidence that they should inspire, that they can do the job in a way that would be good for the country.
But young voters are up for grabs in this election, and I don't know a voter under 30 who would have watched tonight and could say, I have confidence in Joe Biden and casting my vote for 4 more years of Biden.
And this opens the door, by the way, for the conversation about, if Joe Biden remains the candidate, you're not voting for Joe Biden. You are voting for President Kamala Harris. Let's be honest. That is where the Trump campaign is going to go with this. They started down this road with an ad they released today. But this conversation about who you're actually casting your vote for, the volume is going to ratchet up. And I got news for you. She's less popular than he is. That is going to be a big problem for the Democrats if this ticket stays the way it is.
Yeah, and a Scott's Democratic friend who maxed out, right? That's the sentiment you're going to hear, I think, from some of my Democratic friends who are texting me saying, I can't believe this is where we are, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to forgive the party for putting in this position.
Look, on Donald Trump's lies, I mean, I spent a lot of time thinking about this throughout the debate, because, you know, we in the media, I sit in the chair and I fact check Trump all the time. So I know these lies by heart at this point. But people watching from home do not. And Biden's job, as the other person on the other side of the stage, is to be the one to very quickly dispense with the lies and to shut them down. And I don't think that happened enough times in a coherent way to blunt the fact that Trump was taking a universe that was built on a house of lies and building a whole world for the millions of people watching.
Particularly on some of the most basic subject matters that President Biden should have been able to just...
That world that he was able to build, it was not knocked down by the president. That is really at the heart of the problem. He may have won when he was making his discrete policy points, but part of the job on the debate stage is dealing with an opponent like Donald Trump, who goes like a mile a minute on things that are not true. And if you don't
I'm
deal
not
with
sure,
that,
Abby.
I don't know if
But
no one at home is doing that.
All I
No
want
one
to
at
say
home
is
doing that.
I'm not sure. I don't think you're giving viewers enough credit. I think what they saw was the Trump that they didn't like. And I don't think he did himself a great service tonight.
But
yes, and I also think we should let voters absorb this and see what they say, right? Let's look at the dials. Let's look at where they are next week. We can make our pronouncements, but ultimately voters have to absorb it.
They're going to turn your mics off, guys.
Real quickly, on the one thing that, that Biden did fact check him on the Charlottesville thing, he was completely wrong. Right? So he's up there talking about Charlottesville and Trump not denouncing the two sides. And Snopes was out last week. 7 months, 7 years too late kind of thing on the deal. And that's the thing Joe Biden's going to fact check him on, something that was proven false.
We're going to more with the panel out here. A lot of notable moments, painful moments from tonight. But as we've been talking about, perhaps a single defining one as well, this one early on.
Making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare.
That was one notable moment early on. Let's go to Erin in the spin room. Erin?
That's right. That was a moment, I'm sure, Anderson, that you, your panel, me, my panel, and people around the country, that was a painful moment to watch. It was early on in the debate, and Audie, Caitlin, and Chris are here. It was very early on. Chris, it seemed from that moment, that was it.
I think it was even before that moment when he first started speaking, President Biden, and that the raspiness, the hoarseness in his voice, that was at 9/11, and there were several minutes when Jake and Dana were setting the rules, so it's got to have been less than 10 minutes into the debate, and he totally lost his train of thought and ended up saying Medicare just out of the blue. We've heard so much from the other panel, their reactions to this. I think ever since, and I've had this conversation so often, that after the midterms, if Joe Biden, after a remarkably successful first 2 years and a remarkably successful midterm for a first-term president, had said, I'm the transitional president, and I'm moving on and sending it to another generation, but he was unwilling to do that, and Jill Biden was unwilling to do that, and ever since then we have been.
I'm just as you're saying that, I'm only interrupting you, Chris, because that is a watch party. That's live right now. Joe Biden is joining her at the watch party she was at in Atlanta. Obviously, a response that does not match what seems to be the broader response. They're cheering for him right there, as you can see. 4 more years.
Do we want to watch that, or?
No, we don't have to.
Okay, we're not. Anyway, I was just going to say that the two of them decided after November of 2022 that he was going to seek the presidency when there were so many people who thought he should have turned it over to a new generation. And this has been, quite frankly, a car accident in slow motion that we've seen over and building and questioning it. And, as has been pointed out, Joe Biden sought this debate at this remarkably early time because he knew he was losing and he needed to change the narrative. Yep. And he did change the narrative. He sunk his campaign tonight.
Well, and we are in the spin room right now. This is where the surrogates and allies of the campaign come to spin their candidates' respective performances, and it is going to be an immense challenge for Biden's surrogates. We have Governor Gavin Newsom here and also Georgia Senator Raphael Warnock in the back of the room. There are Trump campaign aides in here as well. No reporters are talking to them. Every reporter in here has just swarmed the two Biden surrogates that are inside this room. And I think what I'm most struck by after listening to that entire performance and talking to the Biden campaign officials and covering President Biden myself his first 2 years in office was part of his closing statement there. He made no mention of abortion or Donald Trump's felony conviction. The two things that they have talked about the most, the fact that that is the biggest contrast between President Biden and former President Donald Trump, obviously the felony conviction, but also what they've done on reproductive rights and the fact that 3 of the justices who helped overturn Roe versus Wade were put on the Supreme Court by former President Donald Trump. But on January 6th itself as an issue, Donald Trump lied about January 6th. He downplayed his own role, and he also claimed that police officers were ushering people in that day. They've testified they were actually overwhelmed and outnumbered, and that is why people were able to get into the Capitol that day. And President Biden, who delivered an address on the anniversary of January 6th and said that Donald Trump was holding a dagger to the throat of democracy, did not seize on that moment and did not take that.
So can I just for a moment, because we can hear him, and this is happening right now. So I just in this moment, he's at a watch party. They're cheering 4 more years. He's speaking. What I'm curious about, okay, is does he know how bad this was at this moment? He walked out to his aides and
President who's had a really...
Since we can hear it, why don't we listen to a little bit of it? Okay.
Heading to North Carolina. All right. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to go home with you. Thank you.
All right, so there he is. Thank you, thank you. The rousing applause going to that party.
Okay, he wasn't a third that vibrant or vigorous inside the debate body.
Yeah, I mean, I think fundamentally, I think a lot of Americans saw Donald Trump they recognized tonight, right? His mannerisms, his quickness in his response, and as you talked about, lies and information that was incorrect. Unfortunately, they also saw a Joe Biden maybe they don't recognize. This is not the person who was quick on his feet or fast to parry or to respond quickly to misinformation, to respond quickly to lies.
He hasn't been that Joe Biden in a long time. This was the culmination of a process.
Perhaps, but it also was stark. You know, before I went into this conversation, I thought about the idea of infirm versus unstable. And I think that Joe Biden did not do enough to mitigate the idea that he is infirm. And Donald Trump was able to mitigate looking unstable. When I think about how he talked about abortion, for instance, trying to show that he was not extreme in some way. I know people are pointing out his lies tonight. That is also something that Joe Biden was to be doing in a more effective way and did not. And so it's sort of hard to be here now and say, this was said and that was said. Like, that's your job on the stage, to also jump in quickly.
There were also moments where the sentence would end and there was maybe an attempt to have a back and forth between them, obviously because the mics, they weren't able to do that. And then there would be another question.
It wasn't the Biden campaign. You have to use your time effectively. And unfortunately, the president did not do that.
I'm going to pick up on that. I mean, there was a question asked about what are you going to do for blacks and black voters, which is a constituency that Biden is in terrible jeopardy of losing. He finishes his statement and the moderator, I forget which one, says you have 49 seconds left. Basically, almost half of your 2 minutes. Then he's asked about Social Security, and I think it was Dana says, you have 82 seconds left. I mean, he wasn't able to even fill the 2-minute time he was given where the other guys might go up to talk about black voters and protecting Social Security.
And not to, I don't speak on behalf of black voters, but that was a great example of an issue where both of them sounded just like wild. What is the policy? What is a black job and a black child care? It was like, what is happening? It was very similar to the end when they started going off about golf. Why? I mean, those are those moments where I think as a voter, you're just like, these are the options, and it doesn't feel great.
Is one of the #1 concerns that you hear from parents in this country. Parents have to quit their jobs because it's less expensive for one person to not work instead of having to pay for childcare. Neither of them gave a substantive answer on that. They were both answering questions about very different topics. I mean, Chris and I turned to each other and said, this was a question about childcare costs.
A lot of clumsy kind of response.
But I'll note that the mics, and that was, the Biden campaign agreed to that. They wanted that because they were so frustrated by how that first debate in 2020 went on this issue. And you did see Biden not using his time effectively with those times where Trump was not answering the question. I mean, Trump was asked 3 times if he would accept the results of the 2024 election. Obviously a critical question as we find ourselves in a state where he sought to overturn the election results here and was indicted and had his mugshot taken about 3 miles from where we're sitting right now. And that was not a moment that became a point of focus. It was like watching a debate with someone who is not a convicted felon and is not also under all of these criminal charges. And I think that is a question of why President Biden himself, who brings it up in other moments did not use it more effectively. They used it in the one moment where he brought up Stormy Daniels as well. Donald Trump denied having sex with her in another surreal moment in this debate. I don't think that that's ever been uttered on a presidential debate stage, but it was something that you see President Biden talk more about from the White House or in front of donors.
Even
at closed
Trump's
door
attempt to
events.
spin January 6th, I just thought, oh, here we are in one of the most bizarre moments, right? The idea that actually on January 6th, there was a lot of good things happening. And if you just think back to that time, it was just so sort of a wild way to spin that. And again,
I thought it was a
Biden's
pretty
not,
effective way to spin that.
well, it would be less if the president could respond to it.
Right, yes.
but
that's exactly right.
But Chris, he goes through 6 days of preparation at Camp David.
More than that.
And they know the
It
rules.
was more than a week.
Okay, and so more than a week. They know the rules. He practices with the mics. He knows every one of these questions is coming. And yet he couldn't fill the time. Now, I just want to, let's see what the White House is saying. Sources close to the White House are saying he had a cold, wasn't feeling well. I mean, as you would expect, that came out early on in the debate. But what accounts for someone with so much experience doing so much preparation and this being the outcome?
Honestly, I think the question answers itself. He wasn't capable of doing any better than he did. He had
There's a world where he prepared to not go over the 2 minutes.
He was incapable tonight on the biggest of stages that he sought. He, in effect, dictated, and with all of that preparation, he was incapable of doing better than he was. And you can't come back from that. You can't be on a stage where tens of millions of Americans watched you and come up empty. And that's what he did tonight.
He almost seemed a bit nervous at the beginning, Audie.
We could read all kinds of things into the facial expressions and, the utterances, but I think at the end of the day, we heard the partisan panel start to wistfully look in the air and talk about what if he wasn't on the ticket. And I think that kind of language and the kinds of things that you're going to see over the next 24 hours is really going to be the important conversation. This debate was early. Is it early enough for there to be some other discussion, more fulsome, taken more seriously? And we'll find that out.
And one of the questions I have is, if Joe and Jill Biden don't make that decision on their own, is there anybody in the party? Because, the party's system has been so weakened. There were a group of people that came to Richard Nixon in August of 1974 and said, you know what? You got to leave. You have 4 votes in the Senate, and you either resign or you're going to be removed from office. I'm not sure there's anybody with that kind of authority in the Democratic Party who could go to Joe Biden and say, it's time to say goodbye.
And they said that President Biden had a cold and that he was recovering from that. I mean, that came about 50 minutes into the debate after he had been on. Obviously, they're passing that on background to reporters who are tweeting it. Voters who are watching at home, millions of them who have never even considered having a Twitter account, are not going to see that. And it's not really going to help reassure voters, because we do live in this moment where President Obama had a really terrible first debate. His own aides will now admit it, that he came off and he wasn't prepared and he wasn't ready, and Mitt Romney surpassed him in that debate. What's different about this is that voters already had quite high concerns about President Biden's age. And this was a moment where they were hoping it would look more like the State of the Union address and how he came out there and how he dealt with the Republicans who were heckling him. Here in this debate, President Trump would give his answer, and President Biden would come out and say, that's a lot of malarkey, that's a lot of foolishness. But he didn't have the same demeanor that he did in 2020, where he looked directly at the camera and said, it's not about this. It's about you at home who are having these moments. He wasn't smiling and laughing as much as he was in the first debate. It was a very different demeanor in how he handled Trump. Trump, on the other hand, was not even making eye contact. He wouldn't even look at President Biden or in his direction as he was trying to stick to the messaging, or he would redirect a question about a general of his resigning into Biden and Afghanistan. He was taking those moments.
Detours.
And that is something that the Trump campaign worked with Trump on privately. And I can tell you, obviously this is the Trump campaign. This is what they're saying. They could not be more thrilled with how tonight went and feel really good about it. And they were nervous going into this debate of how Donald Trump would do. And now they're walking out of it feeling pretty good.
Yes, certainly maybe didn't expect even
Somebody sent me an emoji from a top person in the Trump campaign, just 4 flames, 4 dumpster fire flames. Another one wrote train wreck. They couldn't feel better about it. And they should feel good about it. It was a very good night. And the one thing I will say for Trump, and there's no question, he lied about a lot of stuff. But he also showed real discipline. And, you know, one of the big questions you talked about, unstable versus unfirm, he was not unstable, and he was very controlled, controlled even in the lies, but he had discipline.
He called Biden a Manchurian candidate. He lied about late-term abortions and completely misrepresented what happened on January 6th as well.
Well, there were many things that were not true, but
it was not a repeat of
contrasting
2020.
with an unstable sort of perspective. All right, all stay with me for more reaction. Anderson, I know we've got to hear what the White House has to say now.
Yeah, I want to bring in senior White House correspondent MJ Lee, who covers the Biden campaign, how they're seeing this tonight. What are they saying?
Yeah, well, Anderson, obviously a ton of Democrats, voters, elected officials were tuning in tonight, really nervous and really desperate for President Biden to give his a performance. And after his performance, it has really set off panic. There was one Democratic congressman I was in touch with who was on Capitol Hill at a watch party with a number of other lawmakers. And that moment early on in the debate where President Biden was talking about the national debt and seemed to lose his train of thought, paused for several seconds, and then gave a confusing answer. He said that when that happened, the entire room was just completely silent and in shock, and that this member's own reaction was that he wanted to jump off of a bridge. And he said that throughout the course of the 90 minutes of the debate, he and the other lawmakers in the room felt like Donald Trump looked young and Joe Biden looked old, and that Donald Trump seemed to mostly be on the offensive, and that Joe Biden seemed to be mostly on the defense. Democrats, he said, are just panicked right now and don't even know what to do. I mean, these are some really devastating reviews for a Biden campaign that really wanted to use tonight to dispel this notion that President Biden is too old for a second term. You and I were just talking about right before the debate, how Biden advisors were hoping that for tonight, a lot of Americans would be tuning in and seeing a President Biden that was more than just the 5, 10, 15-second clips that they often see on social media where he does look feeble or older. And now we have another example of the kind of moment that is sure to go viral on social media. The Biden campaign, I should note, is obviously trying to do their best to offer their best spin. You know, they have pointed out moments from the debate that they say, landed better for President Biden on January 6th on the abortion issue. They're also saying that for President Trump, when he was being more vicious and being more personally insulting, that wasn't a good look for him. One source familiar with the campaign's thinking said, yeah, the president had a slower start, but he did warm up both on substance and on style. But I have to tell you, Anderson, so far, I haven't heard a convincing argument or spin on the president's overall performance, either from the White House or the campaign.
MJ, thank you. CNN's Kristen Holmes has some new reporting from the Trump camp. What are you hearing tonight?
Yeah, Anderson, I mean, you just heard a lot of what MJ had to say, and because of that, it's no surprise that Donald Trump's team is currently celebrating the outcome of the debate. They believe that Donald Trump won handily, and there's really two reasons for that. One, as Kayla noted earlier, they were nervous going to the debate. They had done a lot of preparation. They had really encouraged Donald Trump to stay on message, but there's always that chance that Donald Trump is going to go rogue. They don't believe he did. They believe that the former president did exactly what they wanted him to do and what he set out to do, which was to just stay focused on message, to not go overtly with the attacks on Joe Biden and his family, to not be too aggressive, and to look hinged, to look like somebody who could be the next president of the United States. They believe that he accomplished that. Now, the other part of this, of course, is what we just heard from MJ. We are hearing Democrats, both privately and publicly, talk about Biden's debate performances. They have been, Trump's senior advisors, closely monitoring social media, looking at the clips of people saying that Joe Biden looks feeble and weak, talking about the fact that Joe Biden had a number of pauses. They believe that obviously adds to their case that they won the debate earlier tonight. And in fact, there had been some rumor and speculation that Donald Trump might show up here in the spin room. I spoke to one senior advisor who said, why would he do that when he just had such a remarkable performance? He doesn't need to go out there and do any spinning. They want him to just get in his car and go home and take the win. That's where they are standing right now. And again, They were nervous going into this. They had done extensive preparation, despite the fact that they said that Donald Trump didn't need to prepare. They had even been watching old video clips. They are very happy tonight on their way to Virginia, where he'll hold a rally tomorrow.
Kirsten Holmes, thanks very much. Back here with the team outside the debate hall. John King, I mean, what happens now?
Well, a couple things happen. Number one, we wait. I would say we should wait. We won't, but we should wait a week and see how this settles out in the polling, particularly in the battleground state polling, and particularly among the most important subgroups. What happens right now is I would just say that if the Trump people are running around saying they won the debate, we'll see if that holds up. Biden lost the debate. I don't know if Trump won the debate. The early indications we're getting, again, from pollsters and party strategists who were talking to people in focus groups and doing dial groups, is that Trump actually fared pretty poorly on the issues, and his tone was negative. So I don't think we don't have any evidence before us right now, in the hour after it ended, that Trump gained a lot of new voters, put it that way, right? Did he hurt himself with the Trump base? Absolutely not. And so that, Donald Trump's going to get 40-something. He's going to get 40-something. Did he grow tonight? I'm a little skeptical of that. The main issue, though, is the president of the United States, the incumbent. Again, I don't know that the old rules apply because he's running against the former president, but this is my 10th one of these, and when the incumbent is running, the American people are being asked, keep what you got. Do you like what you got? Stay the course. That was not a stay-the-course performance from a president who, when he walked on stage, knew the fundamentals of this race were already bent against him. And that he had a 38% approval rating. 60+% of the country thinks we're on the wrong track. And as Abby noted earlier, there were already significant doubts about, can you do this for 4 more years? It's the toughest job in the world. And so even in the middle of the debate saying he had a cold, I have a cold. I get it. I get it. That sucks. But, he's the president of the United States. When the phone rings at 3 o'clock in the morning, the world doesn't matter if you have a cold or not.
And the president did intensive preparation for this debate. I mean, that's the other part of this.
And they signaled that repeatedly.
They told him repeatedly. I mean, he was in Camp David. All of his top advisors were there. They were preparing him as well as they possibly could for this moment. We came in here saying, sorry, Van, just a moment, but he had to solidify, and it's not just his base, it's who voted for him the last time around, right? Now, who voted for him last time around was enough for him to beat Donald Trump. Donald Trump can stay just where he was the last time around. And if Joe Biden erodes so significantly that it's less than what Donald Trump got, Donald Trump wins. Okay, that's how the math works here. So he has to bring back all of those people, whether they're Democrats or not, who cast a ballot for him. Was he able to do that tonight? I don't think there's anybody who thinks that he was.
Well, I tell you, I am starting to get the pushback now from people who are not in agreement with us. I just want to get some, hey, listen, I
didn't watch the debate.
No, I actually did. A major black leader just called me and kicked my butt. And so I just want to give, the other side, which is that Republicans would never throw their guy overboard, even if they had a guy that had felony convictions, even if they had a guy that led an insurrection, even if they had a guy who was a serial liar, they would never throw their guy overboard. And there are people who are angry tonight. The Democratic Party leaders are already abandoning Joe Biden, and they're saying that we already know that he's older and slower, but what he stands for matters. What he was, if you, as Axelrod said, if you wrote out what he said, if you didn't listen to it, the substance of what he said is true to the Democratic Party, and there's a pushback beginning to say the Democratic Party is too scared to stand up for Joe Biden. Other people will.
Yeah, but I want to give Van. Can I just respond?
Yes, sir.
I believe this. I think when we see sort of voter surveys and so on of people who watch the debate and so on, they're going to be a lot different than you might think, because I don't think Donald Trump had a great night, and I think on substance Biden did fine, but that wasn't the big question about Biden. But here's the thing. People can love Joe Biden. Lots of Democrats do. I worked with him. I have deep respect for him.
Yes, sir.
But as you said earlier, the stakes are enormous. You said democracy's on the line.
It is.
And so it becomes less an issue about loyalty to one person than to the idea of how much are you willing to fight for.
I just want to give a voice to other folks.
Let me jump in quickly on this point that Van just made, because one of the reasons I started this voter project is Washington is often wrong, about these things, so I'm always skeptical when all the elites in Washington or the people who live comfortable lives in Washington. This conversation is not just Washington. I want to make that clear tonight. This is Democrats across the country who are watching, Democrats who live in competitive areas, Democrats who love Joe Biden. It'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. But the other question I would just raise is, so there has to be a conversation with the president after tonight, right? Some of those conversations will be from people who say, sir, you should step aside. But if you want to take Van's position out there, the main organizing impetus in the Democratic Party is keep Donald Trump in retirement, right? Keep him out of the White House. So if you won't step aside, what are the conversations about what to do about tonight? Those will have to happen. So my question for the people who know best, and the one who knows the best is sitting right over there, is who can have that conversation with the president?
Who's the only person in the party?
I mean, Bill Clinton or Barack Obama might call him, but I don't know if that would matter.
There's
Is
one.
it Jill Biden, Ted Kaufman? Who is it?
Yes, yes. Jill Biden is the single most important person in terms of sharing criticism, in terms of being direct.
But will she?
The opinions. Oh, absolutely. Land on this is critically important before the elites sitting at this table determine that the rest of the country hated the performance. I think we got to see what voters have to say.
All right, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, Vice President Kamala Harris will be joining us.
There is a storm coming, an event like the world has never seen before. The emerging event will have little to do with weather, but more about developing situations that were foreseen many years ago. We have always warned you during severe weather and news events that affected many. Now, Channel 1 Atlanta begins a new series to warn.
Again, a confirmed tornado on the ground in downtown Conyers. Is a very dangerous and life-threatening weather event. Get into the interior section of your house, away from windows or a basement if you have. And there's the debris right there in the Millstead area near the Rockdale Medical Center. Right. Channel 1 Atlanta.
The first debate of the 2024 presidential campaign is now history. The fallout from it is just getting started. Joining us now is Vice President Kamala Harris. Madam Vice President, thanks for being with us. CNN's John King has described a panic inside the Democratic Party right now because of President Biden's performance in tonight's debate. He's been hearing from Democratic lawmakers and others around the country. Some within your own party are wondering if President Biden should even step aside. What do you say to that?
Listen, first of all, what we saw tonight is the president making a very clear contrast with Donald Trump on all of the issues that matter to the American people. Yes, there was a slow start, but it was a strong finish. And what became very clear through the course of the night is that Joe Biden is fighting on behalf of the American people, on substance, on policy, on performance. Joe Biden is extraordinarily strong. And
but I'm sorry,
that
on
cannot
substance
be
and
debated.
policy and performance tonight, I mean, the president's performance tonight clearly was disappointing for his supporters. CNN is reporting Democratic lawmakers watching the debate were worried about the president's performance. One said it was a disaster. Another called it a train wreck. Those are Democrats especially worried that Biden did not punch back on Trump's lies.
Listen, people can debate on style points, but ultimately this election and who is the president of the United States has to be about substance. And the contrast is clear. Look at what happened during the course of the debate. Donald Trump lied over and over and over again, as he is wont to do. He would not disavow what happened on January 6th. He would not give a clear answer on whether he would stand by the election results this November. He went back and forth about where he stands on one of the most critical issues of freedom in America, which is the right of a woman to make decisions about their own body. He has been completely ambiguous and all over the place about where he stands on that issue, despite the fact that he hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade, and that's exactly what they did. And just 3 years ago, we commemorated the 2-year anniversary of Dobbs, wherein women across our country have been denied emergency health care,
All that may be true. All that may be true. But the president of the United States was not able to make that case to Donald Trump on the stage tonight. I mean, you debated against then Vice President Biden 4 years ago, and he was a very different person on the stage 4 years ago when you debated him. That's certainly true, is it not?
Anderson, the point has to be performance in terms of what a president does. A president who incites an insurrection against the Capitol. No, but I got the point that you're making about a 1.5-hour debate tonight. I'm talking about 3.5 years of performance in work that has been historic.
But
whether
is that
it be
the man who we saw on the stage tonight? Is that the person you see in meetings every day?
The person that you saw on the debate stage that has, for the last 3.5 years, up until today, performed in a way that has been about, whether it be in the Oval Office, negotiating bipartisan deals so that we have an infrastructure, a real infrastructure plan where we're putting trillions of dollars on the streets of America to upgrade our infrastructure. Whether it be the person I see in the Oval Office who is meeting with heads of the military and the intelligence community and in the Situation Room, ensuring the safety of America. The person I see in Joe Biden on the world stage, convening world leaders who often ask for his advice, most recently just during the G7 conference. So I'm not going to spend all night with you talking about the last 90 minutes when I've been watching the last 3.5 years of performance.
But this was a debate that your campaign wanted. You pushed for this debate at this moment. You can't honestly say, can you say that you are not concerned at all having watched the president's performance tonight?
It was a slow start. That's obvious to everyone. I'm not going to debate that point. I'm talking about the choice in November. I'm talking about one of the most important elections in our collective lifetime. And do we want to look at what November will bring and go on a course for America that is about a destruction of democracy, electing a man who has said he'll be a dictator on day one? Or do we want to continue on a course that's about strengthening America's economy, building and creating 15 million American jobs, over 800,000 manufacturing jobs? I got that this is the afterplay for the debate, this conversation that I'm in, and I understand why everyone wants to talk about it, but I think it's also important to recognize that the choice in November between these two people that were on the debate stage involves extraordinary stakes. And there's one person on that stage who has the endorsement of their vice president, and that's Joe Biden. Mike Pence is nowhere to be found in supporting Donald Trump, and that's why he has to look for someone else to run with him who, as we know, will embolden and rubber stamp whatever he wants, because they're going to have to make a choice to not be Mike Pence and to put Donald Trump over their country.
Neither person on that stage tonight made the argument as coherently as you just did. You mentioned reproductive rights. I'd like to just play that exchange that we saw tonight.
Under Roe v. Wade, you have late-term abortion. You can do whatever you want, depending on the state. You can do whatever you want. We don't think that's a good thing. We think it's a radical thing. We think the Democrats are the radicals, not the Republicans.
For 51 years, that was the law. 51 years, Constitutional Scholarship said it was the right way to go. 51 years, and it was taken away because this guy put very conservative members on the Supreme Court. He takes credit for taking it away. What's he going to do? What's he going to do, in fact, if the MAGA Republicans, he gets elected, and the MAGA Republicans control the Congress, and they pass a universal ban on abortion, period, across the board at 6 weeks or 7 or 8 or 10 weeks, something very, very conservative. Is he going to sign that bill? I'll veto it. He'll sign it.
To someone who watched this debate tonight and has serious concerns about the President of the United States, what do you say to them about what they just saw?
They saw they witnessed the fact that if Donald Trump were elected to be President of the United States this November, he will sign a national abortion ban. Take him at his word. He said he would when he was president before. He said if it came to his desk, he'd sign it. There's no reason to believe anything would change. A national abortion ban means that folks in New York, California, Maryland, all these other states that have protected the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do will be at risk. That's what you should take away from that discussion.
And just finally,
Joe Biden was very clear.
I know we have to go.
He signed back into law the protections of Roe v. Wade.
The person we
These
saw
are big
tonight,
issues,
the president we saw
substantive
tonight on that
issues.
stage, is that how he is every day?
The Joe Biden that I work with every day is someone who, as I have said, has performed in a way that has been about bringing people into the Oval Office, Republicans and Democrats, to compromise in a way that is extraordinary these days because it just doesn't happen, but Joe Biden can make it happen. The Joe Biden I see is someone who goes to our allies around the world and strengthens NATO to the point that there are 2 new members of NATO who just about 4 years ago, people said, is NATO even have a reason for existing? The Joe Biden I know is someone who has delivered 800,000 new manufacturing jobs and bringing manufacturing back to the United States, not shipping jobs out like Donald Trump did. So that's the Joe Biden I know.
Vice President Kamala Harris, I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Back with the panel, joining us as well as Biden biographer Evan Osnos. Evan Osnos, you have watched President Biden a lot. What did you make of tonight's performance?
I don't think there's any other way to put it. This was clearly a person who was diminished from where he was on the debate stage 4 years ago. I think for a lot of Americans who don't follow politics closely, they saw that and they were shocked. I will tell you, Anderson, what what I see now and over the course of the next few hours and days is that it's going to come down partly to how Joe Biden makes sense of this, because his self-mythology has always been, okay, I'm the guy that gets knocked down and I get back up. That is, in some ways, it could be a real impediment to him if he's not going to be able to listen clearly to what people around him are going to say. There has to be some very hard conversations. And if he is in some ways occluded by that story that he tells himself, that he can always prevail, that's going to interfere with his ability to be a clear strategic thinker.
And the panel here, John King.
I just want to make an observation about your interview with the vice president. The Republicans are going to probably disagree with me. But I think one of the greatest acts of political malpractice I have seen in my lifetime doing this is that they kept her under wraps for 3 years. Now she's out on the road. She has great appeal. Does she have weaknesses? Yes. Do Republicans view her as a liability? Yes. Are her polling numbers great? No. But she has appeal with the pieces of the Biden coalition where he is hurting them most. And when you go into inner city Milwaukee, what do Black Americans say? Where's the vice president? Where has she been? They want the president too, but she's right there. Is she feisty communicator, good on television, and they kept her under wrap for 3 years. Now she's out there busy on the campaign trail. I know in Republican places, you'd beat her up, but in a close competitive race when you need all hands on deck, that is an asset that should have been working for them from day one. And Joe Biden was vice president for 8 years. If there's anyone who should have understood how hard it is to be vice president, how hard it is to establish an identity as vice president, it's him. And again, she's churned through staff. She has issues. There's no question about it. But she also has potential star power. And on issues like reproductive rights and in the black street community, she is a great asset to this team, and they have kept her under wraps.
I would say two things, John. Like she was in charge of the border. She could have. That was her job to begin at the beginning of the presidency. I think she was largely absent from that. So you could say what you want. I just want to give a quick plug for our colleagues, who I think, not our colleagues, but Anderson, your colleague, Dana and Jake.
Oh, yeah.
They did an incredible job tonight. The debate went flawlessly. It was everybody in the world was watching to see if it was going to be a fair debate, if they were going to be favoring, one side or the other. They played it right down the middle.
Sure did.
And America's the better for it. So I just like to applaud them and say, great job.
Second that on Jake and Dan. A lot of Republicans were coming after our colleagues this week, and they totally made history tonight. America needed this conversation. They did it. Let me just take the other side of this Kamala Harris debate. It is a fair question to ask right now, what is going on inside the White House every day? Is she currently making more decisions in the White House than we know? Who is making decisions in the White House right now? We're talking about this in terms of, can Joe Biden win an election and serve for 4 years? I want to know what's happening on a day-to-day basis. To me, she is the big story tonight, because her position in this administration, in this campaign, has become magnified by 1,000 right now.
All right.
Well, but she's always. Oh.
Sorry, we got to take a break. Given all the talk tonight about the truth and lies in the debate stage, we're joined by the fact checker Danielle Dale, also ahead Republican Senator Marco Rubio. A lot ahead. Stay with us.
the candidate's performance and demeanor tonight notwithstanding, there is the crucial question of the truth of what was actually said on stage. And our fact checker, Daniel Dale, joins us now. So, Daniel, what stands out to you?
What stood out was the staggering number of false claims from former President Trump. On first count, Aaron, I counted at least 30 false claims. Now, President Biden also made false claims, at least 9 false or misleading statements on first count. I'll give you some of them. He said he's the only president in a while who didn't have any troops dying anywhere in the world. Troops have, of course, died on his watch. He said he's put in a $15 per shot cap on insulin and Medicare. It's a $35 a month cap. He said it's a $200 cap on overall drug spending in Medicare. It's $2,000 a year. He said the border now has fewer crossings than when Trump was in office. That's generally not true. He said, or at least strongly suggested, unemployment was at 15% when he took office. It was actually 6.4. He said Trump wants to get rid of Social Security. Trump doesn't. He said billionaires pay 8.2% in taxes. It's much higher. He said Trump told Americans to inject bleach amid COVID. We know Trump made foolish comments about scientists studying disinfectant injection, but didn't frame it as advice to people. And Biden said the Border Patrol endorsed him. No, its union supported the border bill he supported, never endorsed him himself. In fairness, the president did appear to clarify that one. Now, the Trump list, it is way, way longer. So deep breath. He said some Democratic states allow people to execute babies after birth, an egregious lie that is illegal in every state. He said everybody, even Democrats, wanted Roe v. Wade overturned. Roe was supported by 2/3 of Americans, even more Democrats. He said every legal scholar wanted Roe overturned, abortion returned to the states. Legal scholars have told me directly this is not true. He said the U.S. currently has the biggest budget deficit ever. No, that happened under Trump in 2020. He said the U.S. currently has a record trade deficit with China. That also happened under Trump in 2018. He said Biden personally gets a lot of money from China. Zero evidence of this. He said there were no terror attacks during his presidency. In fact, there were multiple attacks. He said Iran didn't fund Hamas, Hezbollah, other terror groups under his presidency. Iran, in fact, did. He said Biden wants to quadruple people's taxes. That is pure fiction. He said the U.S. has provided way more aid to Ukraine than Europe had. It's actually the opposite. He said the U.S. has provided about $200 billion in Ukraine aid. It's closer to $110 billion. He said 18 or 19 million people have crossed the border under Biden. That is millions too high. He said many of these migrants are from prisons or mental institutions. His own campaign cannot corroborate this. He said Biden has only created jobs for illegal immigrants. Total nonsense. He said Nancy Pelosi turned down his offer of 10,000 National Guard troops on January 6th. There's no evidence she even got such an offer. It was the president, not Pelosi, who had the power to deploy the D.C. Guard. He said Pelosi now acknowledges she turned down the troops. No, her office tells me this claim is still a lie. He said he deployed the National Guard to Minneapolis in 2020. Actually, that was the Democratic governor. He spoke of, quote, ridiculous fraud in the 2020 election. Zero evidence of any widespread fraud. He said NATO was going out of business before he took office. Completely, clearly absurd. He said the U.S. was paying 100% of NATO before he came along. The U.S. made up about 71% of NATO defense spending, not 100. He said he, not Biden, is the one who lowered insulin prices in Medicare. He did it for some seniors, but Biden did it for far more. He said Biden indicted him. Again, no evidence Biden has had a personal role in any of these 4 prosecutions. He said Europe takes no U.S. cars, just not true. He spoke of food prices quadrupling under Biden. That's a wild exaggeration, though they are up. He said Biden made up the idea he called dead service members suckers and losers. No, the Atlantic magazine reported that, and then former Trump chief of staff John Kelly corroborated it. He said Biden called black people, quote, super predators for 10 years. Biden never once deployed that phrase, let alone for 10 years, though he did at least once speak of, quote, predators without specifying it was about black people. He said his Trump tax cut was the largest in U.S. history. Not true, though, in fairness, Biden also said this. Trump said China and others stopped buying from Iran under him. China never stopped. He revived his pet lie, I don't know how many times I've done it, that he signed the Veterans Choice Program into law. Barack Obama did that in 2014. Trump signed an expanded version in 2018. And finally, Trump said Biden got rid of that Veterans Program. Biden has not done that.
All right. Well, Daniel Dale, thank you very much going through every single one of those clearly. Long list. And I'm joined now in the spin room by someone on the short list of candidates who could be selected as Donald Trump's running mate, the Florida Senator Marco Rubio. And Senator, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right. Well, you know, I want to talk about the appearance of everything as we've been talking about. But what Daniel Dale just finished when he went through every single one of those points. Does that give you pause?
Well, first of all, some of those things, the last one he talked about was the VA choice. The VA choice program has actually not been fully implemented. It's been undermined in its implementation. So I think what Donald Trump is saying is that basically this was in place, it was expanded, the Biden administration has actually slowed it down and impeded its implementation. I don't remember all 30 of them he went through, and obviously we don't have to go through the Biden ones either. Suffice it to say that I think tonight, we all are in politics. I'm in office, you guys cover it. But there are millions of people watching who basically want to ask themselves, were we better off under Trump or were we better off under Biden? Did I have more money in my pocket? Was the world safer and more secure? Was the country safer and more secure? And I just think more and more Americans are concluding that they were better off in the 4 years Trump was president than in the 3.5 years that Biden has been president. And I think that's the core issue of this campaign that's going to decide it.
Even with COVID? It was bad.
Yeah, COVID was bad, but Trump didn't create COVID. COVID impacted the entire planet.
But that was how people felt. That was what they lived through.
Sure, but I mean, what does Trump have to do with COVID? He didn't invite. And on the contrary, I vividly recall when he implemented the travel ban from China. I want to say January, maybe February of that year. It was Nancy Pelosi and people like that were criticizing. I think Biden called him a xenophobe for the China ban. We wish he would have done it earlier in hindsight. He invested a massive amount of money, which we had to do, in Operation Warp Speed, that came up with not 1 but 3 vaccines. So if you think about our efforts and the Patient Protection Program, which was bipartisan, but his administration was a key part of, saved Main Street America when everything was being shut down, including states that were shut down for a year. So even those things he doesn't get enough credit for. But obviously, COVID was an anomaly in human history, something that happens once every 100 years and hopefully never happens again. But overall, people have recollections of those years in which they had more money in their pocket. That's a fact.
So I want to ask you about some things as you sit here as his surrogate that he said tonight that are important to you. And I want to start with NATO. The issue of NATO came up and what he thinks about NATO. I want to play that for you, Senator.
Okay.
This is a guy who wants to get out of NATO. Are you going to stay in NATO?
Are you okay with that? He shrugged.
Well, I think this is the negotiator in him. I was in the Senate when he was the president, and he would talk to these guys not like a politician would normally, but he basically is trying to negotiate so that our partners do more. Interestingly enough, the Eastern European countries all punch above their weight in terms of how much they contribute. Poland is an example. The Western European countries have been slower to come to the table and do more. Now, Germany's got going after the Ukraine, and others have gotten going a little bit more. But the truth of the matter is that NATO has been an unbalanced alliance for a substantial period of time. And we tolerated it during the Cold War, but now I think that has to be re-examined. So it's not so much about getting out of NATO, but you have to use some sort of leverage and negotiating tactic to force countries to have these massive social safety nets to spend a little bit more money on their own defense.
So you see it as negotiating. I mean, I know you led legislation that would have required an act of Congress before a president of the United States could withdraw the country from NATO.
Sure.
Did you do that because you were worried about Trump?
No, I think that Congress has an important role to play in an alliance, which is basically a treaty. But by the same token, I would tell you, and I think, by the way, Trump is not the first president in American history. Virtually every president in American history has complained about the Europeans not spending more. And why would they? They have these massive social safety net programs and they don't want to take money out of that and put more into their defense. Some of these countries are highly capable of doing more. You look at the attrition of French military capability and other French capability and other military capabilities from multiple European countries.
Well, they're offering to put troops on the ground if necessary.
Well, but you need to invest for 10 or 15 years. They can't even get their troops there. We would have to transport them, as like we had to do when we sent them to North Africa, or help them by getting their troops to North Africa. These are legitimate points. If we want to have a strong NATO, every country has to do their part, and that's what he's saying. And I think he should have as much leverage as possible to get that done.
So you're sitting here. You're a surrogate for the former president. This is the most important event of this campaign so far. There's supposed to be another debate. We don't know if there will be. This might be it. Are you the VP?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that. And no one's told me I am. I haven't have any reason to think they've even been thinking about it this week. But we'll know who it is at some point in the next 2 weeks. And the good news for Republicans, and I'm sure you've had others on the air tell you the same thing, but it's the truth. We have 8 or 9 people that I think could do a great job. It really comes down to who the president thinks would do a good job. And either way, whether I'm in the Senate or I get a chance to serve in the executive branch, I want to be a part of these issues that we're facing at this moment in our nation's history because they're that important. But that's his decision to make.
So can I ask you, because there's one thing I want to get, you and the former president both live in Florida.
Yeah.
Now, according to the Constitution, state electors have to vote for a president and a vice president, one of whom shall not be an inhabitant of the same state with themselves.
Oh, is that still in there?
That's still in there. So Florida, you can't get the 30 electoral college votes in Florida if you've got 2 people from Florida on the ticket. So would you move? Would you establish presidency somewhere else?
Listen, that would be presumptuous of me to talk about that. No, the job has not been offered to me. I am not the vice presidential choice. No one is right now. And we'll cross bridges when we get to them. Tonight is about the debate. I'm not trying to evade you. I honestly don't know who he's going to pick. And, those are things that you have to make a decision on. Then we'll figure out whoever it is that they pick, what it is they need to do to make their candidacy possible. But ultimately, I think, and I'm not trying to get back to this debate because I do think it's an important night. Maybe this is the last debate. I don't know. I hope it's not. But if it is, I think there's an element here that, look, I don't take glee in it in saying this, but clearly the president struggled tonight. And I do worry about the impact that has in Beijing, in Tehran, in places in Moscow, where adversaries see that and perhaps feel emboldened to be more adventurous in their attitudes towards the United States because they feel our president is somehow struggling. And that's not a good thing for our country. And I think that was painfully obvious tonight. And I haven't watched what people are saying on the shows, but we saw that tonight. And I do think that's a factor here. I really do.
All right. Well, Senator Rubio, I appreciate your time, and thank you very much. And coming up, the results of our flash poll of voters' opinions of tonight's debate. Our David Chalian is going to join us with all of the numbers, the details, the analysis after this. It is midnight here in Atlanta, the start already of a new day, a long night, long days ahead of soul searching coming for the Democratic Party. The questions began just moments into the debate. First about President Biden's performance, and now within the party about his candidacy. Now, that said, there is a lot we don't know about the impact of tonight. And John King earlier tonight said Joe Biden lost the debate, but I don't know if Donald Trump won the debate. And it takes a little bit of time and perspective to start to look at that other side of the equation. But we do have a first and very early first read. Things can change. First read of history. CNN political director David Chalian joins us now with the results of the flash polling tonight. So walk us through it.
Yeah. So, Aaron, I first want to just stress to everyone, this is a poll of debate watchers. So this is not necessarily representative of the electorate overall, although I will say as a partisan makeup, these debate watchers do pretty much look like registered voters, maybe about 4 or 5 percentage points more Republican than the usual universe of registered voters. So just to keep that in mind as you see these results, that little bit of shift won't make a difference here. Look at the big question of the night. Who won the debate? We asked debate watchers in our instant poll. And the answer is a resounding Donald Trump did. 67% of debate watchers in our poll say Donald Trump won the debate tonight. Joe Biden, 33% say he won the debate tonight. Now, this group of debate watchers, they told us who they thought would win the debate going into it before the debate, and take a look at how that changed over time. 55% thought before the debate that Donald Trump would win the debate. 45% thought Joe Biden would win the debate. Look at what the debate did to those expectations. Donald Trump did much better than expected. Joe Biden did worse than expected among this group. And compare this to these two men debating 4 years ago. That's not always a comparison we have, obviously. The rematch is pretty unique. And so take a look at the complete reversal. Again, that top line there is the debate tonight. 67% say Trump won, 33% said Biden. The next line is the second debate in 2020, where Biden won there by about 14 percentage points, 53-39 in our instant poll that night. This looks a little bit more like the first debate. Chris Wallace moderated 60% Joe Biden won that debate that night. 28% said Donald Trump won the debate that night. You can see how this night sort of is a complete reversal of that one. And then take a look at this question we asked. Do you have confidence in the candidate's ability to lead the country? Confidence in ability to lead the country. 14% said they have a lot of confidence in Biden. 36% of debate watchers say they have a lot of confidence in Trump. Neither of those numbers are stellar, by the way. You see 29% say some for Biden, 20% Trump. But here, a majority of debate watchers, 57%, say no confidence in Joe Biden's ability to lead the country. 44%, again, that is not a great number. That is a healthy plurality there in terms of Trump's numbers, say no ability to lead the country, no confidence in his ability to lead the coverage. But again, look at that. A majority say Joe Biden, they're not confident he can lead the country.
Audie, I will say, when you look at the initial screen that David just shared with us, Trump won 67%, Biden won 33%. That's not what we're hearing out there. It's not what we're seeing on social media. I mean, that's a resounding loss, but it's not 100-0, which is what
But remember, we're hearing in punditry. Thinking about a high bar, we went in thinking about low bars. And in terms of meeting expectations, exceeding expectations, in that scenario, the former president certainly earned a win.
Yeah, I mean, we came into this debate where President Biden and the White House knew this. This is why he was at Camp David with his aides for the last week preparing for this. They knew he needed to be able to quiet concerns about his age and his ability to lead another 4 years. It's not just that he's president right now. It's that he's asking voters for another term. And that was how Dana phrased the question tonight, that he would be 86 at the end of a second term if he were reelected. And instead, they're walking out of this with those questions only raised and being raised at the top levels of the Democratic Party. And the vice president defending his performance to Anderson, acknowledging that, yes, it was a slow start, though it was also a pretty difficult end as well. If you watched his closing statement, compared to his closing statement that he delivered during the Chris Wallace debate, which I watched truly this morning, it was a very strong closing statement. In this one, he didn't even mention the word abortion. And it makes all the talk of Republicans this week, including President Trump, saying that Biden was going to be on cocaine and other Republicans claiming that he was going to be on performance-enhancing drugs, seem quite quaint when you look at what the conversation is now.
I also don't think that you can make too much of the fact that 33% said Biden won the debate. There's a certain number of people who just either like Biden or hate Trump, and they're never going to say that Trump won the debate. So I think that's a kind of just... I don't think that's a reflection of the way they viewed the debate. It's a reflection of how they feel about the two candidates.
Okay, what about the other point, though, to what David just laid out? So when you look at the first debate in 2020, that it literally is exactly what we saw, but different in terms of who was on top. So 60% say Biden won, 28% said Trump. So this time it's 67% Trump, 33% Biden. Okay, so those numbers do look the same. So then there's some Democrats who may seize on that, Chris, and say, well, another debate could turn this around. But this is a different situation, right? Because it's about age.
Age and competence and acuity and the ability to do the job and the ability to do the job for 4.5 more years. I mean, this speaks to the biggest question that people have about Joe Biden. And hey,
all available if you want us. Thank you.
Well, all of the Republicans are together.
But Chris, I think you bring up a second debate. The second debate's not until the end of September, and it's not even guaranteed that it'll happen. I think obviously the Biden team will certainly want another crack at this. As you heard Kate Bedingfield earlier and the vice president saying it was a one-time performance, talking about what every single day looks like. I think it's an open question for the Trump campaign, and also it's 3 months away. I mean, this is going to be the lasting impression in voters' minds for at least the next 3 months.
So, David, how does this play into the decision of a next debate? What I thought was interesting, just talking to Senator Rubio, you would have thought it would have been in his interest to say, okay, we're done, we don't need more debates. Certainly in Trump's. It's not what he said. He actually said he wants there to be another debate. There is scheduled to be another debate.
Yeah, so I think it is already accepted. It's an accepted invitation. So for President Biden to pull out of that debate, and again, he's got a summer to get through.
Or Trump could pull out of it and say, I don't need it.
Well, I highly doubt that. I think Trump will walk away thinking tonight served him well. He wanted more debates than the two that they agreed to. So I don't see any necessarily any change from Trump coming. He enjoys the ability to get command that kind of attention. I do think, though,
if this election plays out like the last one, it will be decided in just a handful of swing states. Right now, a quick look at what undecided voters in one of those states, Michigan, thought of what they saw and heard tonight. CNN's Laura Coach watched the debate with them, joins us now from Warren, Michigan. Laura, how was it?
Anderson, we are right outside of Detroit in Macomb County at Macomb Community College. It's a really important moment because, as you well know, this is a very important swing state. It went for Trump, then it went for Biden, but here in Macomb County, the votes actually went for Trump. And we were sitting with undecided voters to figure out what they were thinking. We got their reactions in real time, and there were some very consequential moments here. I want to begin, though, with everyone by giving a show of hands. I want to ask the people who are with me here today. Many of you came in undecided. In fact, most of you, by watching this debate, a show of hands, how many of you have now made up your mind? This is unbelievable to think about how impactful and influential this very moment was. I want to get a sense from all of you. We were all watching the appearance of the two candidates. What did you make of how they both performed and the way that they were appearing in the camera and beyond? Who had a strong reaction, especially to the age component?
I would have to say, after watching the debate and watching how Biden handled himself and answering the questions, it reassured me of his unassurance, be able to lead our country. I'm concerned he was hesitant, very not cognitive. Seemed like his data, he was missing his numbers. So very concerning. That's somebody I don't think that needs to lead our country.
Does anyone share that same opinion? A couple of you do. Who does not? Let me ask you.
One of the big things that a lot of people forget, when we are typically speaking in day-to-day life, we tend to stutter as well. So sometimes it will take time to be able to think about what you're going to say. But regardless, when it comes to a strong leader and what we're looking for in a leader, I'm looking for somebody that I trust to be able to uphold policies that will protect me and are more concerned for the general well-being of everybody in the United States, which I got more from Biden, considering he did a lot more talking about policies, what he's done and what he plans to do. Whereas on the other side from Trump, all I really heard was, I've done this and it was the best ever, but I never heard what it was. Or I heard that Biden was the worst ever, but I never heard why. So there was a lot that was left unclear for me. So while he may have appeared like a stronger candidate, on paper, there was a lot missing in terms of actual debate.
You're nodding along, Victor. Why do you say so?
I would agree with that. And the rules of the debate were you could not bring notes or any written material, so I'd defy anybody to try to speak for 90 minutes and not forget some facts. And the fact that, he struggled with that. He's always had a stuttering problem. But like she said, I think the leadership qualities are there.
There was a very big moment as well in terms of a conversation about the felony convictions. As you know, there are 34 counts out of Manhattan for the former president of the United States. That was actually addressed today. I want to play for you all again and remind you of that moment.
He could be a convicted felon as soon as he gets out of office. Joe could be a convicted felon with all of the things that he's done. He's done horrible things. All of the death caused at the border, telling the Ukrainian people that we're going to want $1 billion or you change the prosecutor. Otherwise, you're not getting $1 billion. If I ever said that, that's quid pro quo.
How many of you heard that conversation between Trump and, of course, the debaters talking about the so-called weaponization of the government? Who believes and agrees with Trump here that he was only targeted because he was a political opponent of Biden? Show of hands. Wendy, you kind of grimaced for a second as to that agreement. Why?
I definitely think that was a political move with the timing of how the charges were brought forward. And even the charges themselves. I'm sure there's many corporations who have employees who take care of the financial documents that write down a legal expense, and you just pay the bill. I mean, I wouldn't question every legal expense on a report, but that's a felony.
Let me ask you, Steve, as well on this point. You seem to be nodding along. What's your reaction?
I think that it's not so much the crime, it's the process or the process leading up. They're trying to use up his time so he can't campaign, use his money, his resources to pay for legal fees so he can't compete with Biden. I think that his mental acuity is a lot better than Biden's. Biden seems to be very tired. Actually, I'm tired of both of them because they just keep going back and forth, back and forth. We just need to get some younger people in there that have clean records that and start over.
Well, there was a moment I want to get to talking about sort of clean records or the tit for tats you're talking about. There was an exchange happening, this time mentioning the convicted felonies, also the accusations of the allegations of having sex with a person who was a porn star, the allegations we've heard time and time again. There was a moment that our audience here, our focus group of people and undecided voters, had some pretty strong reactions to, and you're going to see on the bottom of the screen how they were reacting, how they were divided in different moments and reacting in real time. Listen to that moment.
The crimes that you are still charged with, and think of all the civil penalties you have. How many billions of dollars do you owe in civil penalties for molesting a woman in public, for doing a whole range of things, of having sex with a porn star while your wife was pregnant? I mean, what are you talking about? You have the morals of an alley cat.
Give me a minute, sir.
I didn't have sex with a porn star.
I mean, talking about the morals of an alley cat, for many of you, that was a visceral moment. What was your reaction? Have already made up their mind as a result of what we saw. Anderson?
Laura Coates, thanks, and thanks to all your group. We really appreciate them watching it with us. Back with the panel here in Atlanta. Not sure where to go tonight, but
you had a great point about Kamala Harris right after she talked. And I just wanted to make sure people got a chance to hear from you on it, because I thought it was really well put.
Well, I think it's worth debriefing on that as well, because the conversation right now is also about her.
Yes.
And I thought her interview with you, Anderson, was one of the best times I've seen her in an interview with anyone.
Yeah.
And she clearly understood the moment, the challenge. She needed to defend the president, but she needed to defend herself as well. And I think that one of the things that people always want to see more from her is her personality, a little bit more fire, a little bit more quickness in responding even to things that are challenging. And she showed that tonight. And there's probably no more time in the 3 years that she's been vice president that has been more important than right now. Whether or not all this chatter about what happens with Joe Biden means anything or not, voters need to understand who she is and whether she has what it takes to be second in line to the presidency.
The reason I think it's so important is because I think if people had seen that Kamala Harris and the kind of confidence I think that she brought out in a lot tonight, a lot of Democrats took heart in Kamala Harris. She was on our air and other places, and their people are feeling confident in her. Had that level of confidence existed in a broader way earlier, people would have less concern about Joe Biden. Part of the concern about Joe Biden's age has been people not having that confidence in Kamala. So it's been this kind of double thing. So I do think, I'm just trying to track what's going on here. I do think Kamala Harris did herself some good tonight, which ultimately may help.
Listen, again, where's she been? No one's kept her under wraps.
That's not my job.
Nobody's locked her in the closet.
I'm just saying she did good tonight.
She's the vice president of the United States.
Hubert Humphrey once said the two biggest clubs in the world are the would-have club and the should-have club, and neither are worth belonging to. It really doesn't matter now. Yes. What does matter is what application does it have now. And I'll say one thing. She has been doing a lot better lately, and she did, I think, tonight. If there's a vice president, for all of the caricaturing of her, I would not want to be the person sitting across from her in a vice presidential debate, and there's supposed to be one. But we'll see if it happens.
Well, listen, there are very real concerns tonight and conversations that are being had, hand-wringing about what is going to happen. What the Biden team is obviously going to do is wait the next couple of weeks, see if the polls shift. But I expect that you're going to see not just the vice president out more, you're going to see Gretchen Whitmer out more, you're going to see Gavin Newsom, and they're going to be campaigning for Biden, but they're also showing the chops that they have, because there is a non-zero chance after the performance tonight that a change has to be made if the president were to step aside. And there is a bench. Dems actually have a very strong bench, but not the strongest person at the top of the ticket.
Guys, this conversation about Harris, I mean, listen, first of all, this was not a good interview. She couldn't answer a simple question about what's Joe Biden like on a day-to-day basis, because the honest answer is not acceptable. That's number one. Number two, listen to what you're saying. The sitting president of the United States is so out of it and infirm that you're now turning to the vice president of the United States to carry your ticket and your party when they are currently in office, supposedly running the country.
Yeah.
This is a scandal. The White House press secretary this last few days have been telling us, oh, the videos you've seen of Joe Biden aren't real, they're fakes. The U.S. government right now has a president, and none of us are quite sure what goes on a day-to-day basis, and you're putting all your hopes and dreams into the VP.
Okay, that is not true. As somebody who left that White House about a year and a half ago, I can tell you.
A year and a half?
I can tell you that he is somebody who is very direct in meetings.
Behind closed doors, he's great.
He had a bad night tonight on the debate stage. I'm not disputing that, but I can tell you he drives the ship in the White House. He's the person who makes the decisions. He sit in meetings with him. He's asking you for details. He's always asking you for the dang thing you don't have.
But not for nothing.
And so I understand. I understand what folks are saying. But to say that Kamala Harris was lying about Joe Biden, about how Joe Biden,
she did.
She did though.
But by the way, world leaders are.
We should point out that what Scott is doing right now is what he's doing the Republican Party line there. This is what Republicans are going to be saying, and off of this debate. That, now it's clear that Biden is functioning as president. He's not a great communicator. That's pretty obvious.
They're coming to get you,
How is it? Yeah. How is it clear that he's functioning as president? How is it clear?
Well, the fact is that he's talking to foreign leaders all the time. He's traveling.
He just came back. Overseas.
Okay, but world leaders are bracing for a Trump presidency. Our European allies are bracing for Trump to win. The Arab state leaders are all bracing and planning for Trump to win.
All
it's
I'm
just
saying
a reality.
is when you, honestly, look, Scott, maybe it is a bit overstating it that Joe Biden is not there at all in the White House. But when you talk to regular people, most people, they just take a passing glance at what happened tonight, and they roll their eyes and they say, why is this our choice? And it confirms to them their view that this is basically something they don't need to pay attention to because they have nothing but bad choices. That is a very, very bad thing for Democrats. I don't think a lot of people are sitting here analyzing it to the degree that we are, but for most regular people, they're just saying it confirms what they have already believed about Joe Biden, about whether he can do 4 more years, about whether he is doing a great job today in the presidency. I mean, let's not forget his approval rating right now is partially because a lot of Americans don't believe that right now he is doing a job that they like.
Yeah. And if you just think about 2020 all over again, Joe Biden cannot afford to lose much. So the third-party candidates matter more at the moment. The president has a motivational energy issue, enthusiasm issue with his base. He did not help himself tonight. He likely hurt himself tonight. It's June, so maybe this all passes. The conversation among Democrats is going to try to figure that out. But remember, Georgia, where we are, 11,779 votes, right? Wisconsin, 25,000 votes. Pennsylvania, 40,000 votes. Arizona, 10,000 votes? I don't have all the math in my head. So he can't afford to lose much. Trump voters are going to come out. We know that. So the question is, he was already struggling. Biden came into this debate, not a ton behind, but enough behind for it to cause worry among Democrats. The reason the worry among Democrats has turned from worry into, I would say, panic, or at least lowercase p panic, is because they were worried coming in. They were already worried coming in that, look, he's vastly outspent Trump on television in the battleground states, and it hasn't moved the numbers much. Now, you could also argue, if you want to do the half glass, half full or half empty argument, he's at 38% approval rating, and he's still very close to Donald Trump. That tells you America doesn't want Trump either.
Right.
America does not want Trump either. And so, but the president hurt himself tonight. There's no question about that. The question is, Do the Democrats vent tonight and get over it, or is this some more? Is there a more sustained conversation about what else do we do?
I got to take a break. Everyone stay here. Just ahead, we have more new numbers from our CNN Flash poll on tonight's debate. We'll have that in a moment.
You know, it's not going to go away, John. All the